We've done it again. We did it again. We've done it. We're here. We're doing all the things. We're moving the dice. We're rolling the dice. We're moving the mice. We're making it all happen. Had a great day today hanging out with a friend. We went down. I got some flyers printed for tomorrow. Good evening, Anemone. How you doing? Got some flyers printed for tomorrow for the protest that we're having on August 1st, 4 p.m., Bloor and Bedford. If you can make it, please do. We are... I can't make it tomorrow to hand out the flyers, but fortunately, someone has said that they are going to chip in their time and help with Isabella. So that's really, really good news. I went down, gave Isabella the flyers, and then I went and bought some nice shirts. I went and bought some nice shirts at Value Village. Spent a little bit of time with a friend. You can see I've got the sun, eh? Like I got burnt. I got burnt. What can you do? What can you do? Got some nice shirts. Came home, and now I'm just like, ah. I hope you guys are doing well out in the world, man. Got a nice cup of tea here. Oh. Fantastic, Ligandese. Thank you so much, bud. I appreciate it. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it, man. And you're gonna feel good about it too. One of the things that I've learned about getting people out to organize and all of this is that there's like a wall. There's some kind of barrier, and then once the barrier is broken and you actually go into it, it's actually quite addicting. That there's something really nice about getting out there and getting involved and handing it out, right? And you're gonna experience the full force of the public. And you're gonna experience the full force of Isabella. Just basically do what she says. Just do what she says. She's very forceful. And you're gonna have a good time, I think, bud. You're gonna have a good time. Solidarity. Yeah, solidarity feels amazing. Yeah, we're in a really odd and strange time, right? Like, we need solidarity with one another more than ever. And I just saw, like, solidarity is the best drug. Yeah, you got it. I just saw this, like, literally right before we went on live. Breaking. This is from Ryan Knight. Green Party candidate Matthew P. Ho did the hard work of collecting 13,865 signatures, which is a huge amount of signatures, required to get on the ballot. He submitted 15,953 signatures, and the Board of Elections just voted 3-2 not to certify it. The three people who voted to subvert democracy are Democrats. This is the end of electoral politics. Like, electoral politics doesn't exist in America, and they're making it explicit now that there shall not be a third party. The Democratic Party is owned by the superdelegate system. The Republican Party is explicitly owned by the corporate power structure. Like, we are in a revolutionary moment where we must be protesting, we must be organizing, we must be coming out. There's nothing left. There's literally nothing left. And I'm fine if you are telling me that you are not interested in voting, but if you're not interested in protesting, then I think you're a loser. Straight up. Straight up. If you're not interested in actually coming out and actually, like, fighting back while simultaneously also not voting, because at least if you're voting, you're still kind of stuck in that thinking pattern. Mark, how you doing, bud? You got new glasses? I did not get new glasses. My old glasses broke, right? So this is electrical tape. I was hoping that my new glasses to replace these glasses would have already come in, but they have not. So I'm going to have to wait until next week. So I'm stuck with these dumb-looking dumbness for a little while yet. And boy, do I feel dumb in these. Anytime I catch an image of myself, here I am. I just feel like I look like an idiot. I look dumb. Hey guys, how you doing? And my beard right now isn't in, like, when it gets real full again, it's gonna look really nice. My hair's not quite long enough to start doing what I want it to do, which is I want it to actually start getting like over my shoulder and down. So I'm like in a real like in betweeny transition moment, right? Apparently, if I buy a True Classic T-shirt, I'll get a six-pack immediately. No kidding, Adam. Good to know. Glad to know, bud. Thanks for tolerating those ads, man. And I'm glad that they're there. Honestly, someone's got to pay these bills. Someone's got to pay these bills. Yeah, it was unfortunate. It happened on stream too. Just cleaning my glasses. Just dink. Broken my hands. Broken my hands. Oh, and last night I watched The Batman. I watched The Batman last night. I was talking to some people on stream and also some people I work with, and they were like, no, like, The Batman was actually good. Like, it was better. And you know what? I gotta tell you, The Batman was good. It was a good movie. It was probably the first... it was probably the first movie, the first Batman movie that seriously tackled the character of Bruce Wayne as a character and as a person. That it was less interested in the mythology of the figure of Batman and the glorification of the Bat figure, and more interested in dealing with the reality that Bruce Wayne finds himself in, and really captured the essence of who Bruce Wayne actually is, especially early on, which is a confused young man. That Bruce Wayne he's reclused himself away. He doesn't know what's happening in his own city very clearly. He doesn't know who the major players are. He doesn't know the events of what has occurred in his own family's history. He doesn't know what has happened in his to his own mother. He doesn't know the story of his own father. He doesn't know his family's legacy in the city that he lives in. He's very explicitly an angry young man beating up street thugs. And gets caught up in this larger story because of this figure, the Riddler, right? Whose anger is... His narrative is very much another abandoned by the society story. And even abandoned by the Wayne family themselves, kind of a story. And the story does a good job of actually showing the folly of this path of vengeance that Bruce Wayne finds himself on. And does a pretty decent job of showing class dynamics that exist within the society, but doesn't actually commit and go all the way to saying that the problem is the structure of capital itself. That if I were to do like a strong analysis of the Batman, I would be like, this is where they were hinting at that idea. This is where they were hinting at the idea that capitalism itself is full of structural issues, and that is why someone like Batman is concerned that what he is doing is not helping, because he's fighting symptoms. He's not fighting the root cause. There is no Bruce Wayne. Oh, I disagree. That I think that they did a good job of capturing like his, and I thought that what's his name, Robert Pattinson, probably the strongest actor to have played the role. I think that he was doing things and capturing moments and getting things across simply through acting. That he said a lot without saying anything in certain cases, which I thought was very well done. Certainly stronger than Christian Bale's Batman. Catwoman was terrible. I don't know if I agree with that. I think that they made a strong choice with her. And I know why they made that choice, right? Because they wanted to make they wanted it to be a race conversation. They wanted her to be a strong black female character. But what I liked about Catwoman is that it wasn't, with one exception, with one, like, literal, like, one line, it was never really jammed in my face. That's usually the failing of those sorts of decisions in these kinds of films, is that it's usually thrust in your face and really crammed down your throat. Whereas I thought that Catwoman as a character was well introduced, believable. Her arc was very strong, very, very strong. And of course you enjoyed the Falcones. How could you not? That's the Jesus. You never mess with the Jesus. If anybody told me that Falcone, that guy did a bad job, I'd be like, shut up. Like that, no. The gimp suit Riddler is that's what I like to call a bold choice, right? Was it a good choice? I think I tend to lean on the side that I don't think that the gimp suit, like with the mask, worked. It was strong. And the strength of that decision, I think, carried it through enough so that it functioned. But I don't think that it looked to me as though it was a decision that was made in a vacuum of, we don't know what to do. That's really what it comes down to with that decision. I think it was really like, what do we do with this guy? How do we dress him? What does he look like? Well, we don't know. Gimp suit. It had that kind of a feel about it. It was a strong decision. They committed to it. I think it functioned within the story. But I tend to agree with you. I think it was ultimately, it took the narrative into kind of a sillier place, which I don't think they wanted it to be in. I thought they did a pretty good job of keeping the thing grounded, right? Like, that was the thing that was interesting about that movie, is that they did a good job of taking this character, which is often presented to us in a very mythical, superheroic sort of position, and instead of that, really making sure it was like, no, it's a guy. Like Bruce Wayne is a man walking around with this chip on his shoulder, with this vendetta. I am vengeance. He's constantly called Vengeance. The theme of the film is vengeance. And by keeping it grounded in a more real sort of a place, fairly successfully. Oh, and it's a small technical note, but it's definitely worth saying. The makeup that they put on Penguin, on Colin Firth, was probably some of the best makeup I've ever seen on film. Straight up. Like, Colin Firth looks like a different person. And the makeup they had on him didn't look like makeup. He looked like the person he was supposed to look like. He looked like a person. He didn't look like a person wearing makeup. And I thought that was very, very successful. Like, if I didn't know that it was Colin Firth, and I didn't know who that was, I think I could have just believed that was the guy. right? That's very successful makeup. Like that's a very, very successful practical effect. And the oh, come on, Methane. I think you're being a bit hard on the film. The car chase sequence, the Batmobile itself was pretty kick ass. The all the fight scenes, all of that kind of stuff. Yep. Yep. I think maybe, Methane, you have the same problem I have, which is it's tough to turn off the critical eye. And I completely understand this, where it's you kind of just you tuned out during the car chase, eh? Okay, that's, you know what, man, I get that. I actually do. Like sometimes it's too much. You know, this happens to me if I try to watch any of the John Wick films. John Wick films are like this for me. I can't watch them. After about 10 minutes of the fighting, right? I just can't take it anymore, and I just tune it right out. And if I see like a sequence, like a minute of the sequence of it, I'm like, this is really good. Like this is really good, but it's just more and more and more. And I'm not trying to say that John Wick was bad. I think John Wick absolutely delivers on its premise. It's not trying to be something other than what it is. It's just a lot. Like it's just a lot, you know. And I find that this is happening. Maybe it does also have something to do with me getting older. I think, like, I'm a middle-aged man now. I'm 40, right? And I'm finding this with Mortal Kombat games. That Mortal Kombat games, I can't play them anymore because while I enjoy like the fighting and the martial arts kind of aspect of it and all that kind of stuff, you know, how many times can I watch somebody's jaw get ripped off before I'm just like, oh, come on, like, and I just find it to be too much for me now. It's too overwhelming, and I start to really tune out and no longer enjoy the experience. It kind of feels like I'm getting battered a bit. So I can respect that. And you're making curry chickpeas at the same time. Yeah, there's this as well. Look, I think that here's the thing, the bottom line for me on the Batman. And I'll talk to your point too, Adam. But the bottom line for me on the Batman was that it's pretty clear that they want it to be a trilogy. Pretty obvious, or at least a series. They obviously they did sequel bait, right? No doubt. This first outing, this first film, solid, but I am not confident enough in Hollywood as an idea and these studios as an idea to recommend this film. That I don't want anyone to get hype because this film was good. And it was good. I thought they did a good job because we know what the narrative of Hollywood actually is. First film, good. Strong film. Labor of love. Get them hooked. Second film, kind of do a bit of a phone in, right? Maybe like try to start leaving some crumbs or something, right? Tying up things or creating threads. Third film, who gives a shit? We've got their money. Fuck you, right? But total betrayal. Total betrayal. So I'm not willing to recommend this film to anyone because I'm not confident that the studio is actually willing to tell a good story. That surprisingly, for once, it's a superhero film where the character actually has an arc, even though that arc is kind of like he goes from pursuing vengeance to pursuing power, essentially, which is, you know, a shift. It's a change in his ethos. He still remains the Batman. He still remains this person. He's still engaging in the system without actually critiquing the system. He's still fighting street thugs and he's still doing all that kind of stuff. But instead of it being his ethos tied up in vengeance, it's now about power. But it's an arc nonetheless. But are they gonna continue? Is the next film actually going to be a continuation of this arc and his pursuant path of, and asking this question of, is the Batman valid? Is the Batman valid? Because that's the central question. Who the fuck is this guy, man? Like, what? Who does he think he is? Right? He's some rich kid who doesn't know what the fuck's going on, beating up street thugs. Like, who the fuck does this guy think he is? Hey, Watson, how you doing? Yeah, Keanu Swartz. We can't be perfect. Not everybody's perfect, man. I know. I'd be curious to hear what his full thing is, because sometimes people say things like I'll be straight with you guys. If Taiwan actually stood up and declared its independence, I'd be like, yeah, okay. Like, what are you gonna do? Like, a nation declares its independence. That's the right of the citizens of that group to do. If California declared its independence tomorrow, I'd be like, yeah, okay. Like, places have the right to declare their independence, right? The issue of what's going on with Taiwan is that they're in this in-betweeny bullshit place where they refuse to declare their independence officially, and they refuse to kind of pick a side. So they're in this kind of nebulous gray zone. And that's the heart of the issue with Taiwan. That China has its perspective, America has its perspective, and the Taiwanese citizens themselves have their own perspective. And no one is really willing to kind of plant a flag and make a move. Spoiler, here we go. Adam McPherson saying spoilers. The Batman made it seem as though that the cops were bad, then all of a sudden the cops were good, showed up the end of the nowhere. I did an oh brother eye roll. Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about here, Adam. That it was very much a not all cops kind of statement. I think that that's for sure the truth. That while the film was an indictment of corrupt politicians and corrupt officials and corrupt cops, and was very explicit that, of course, these systems can be corrupted, and of course mob bosses can get involved with corrupting all of this kind of stuff, and it can all get tied together into shitty kind of stuff. At the end of the story, there was very much an understanding that good cops will stand up. That the problem isn't that the entire system is corrupted and all of the police with it. It's that there's a small minority that can ultimately be overwhelmed and overthrown, and that the good cops will actually fight back, right? So it really did have like and I think this is a very strong critique, actually, of the Batman, because it's ultimately pro-cop, and it's ultimately not all cops are bad, right? Not all cops. It's just a few bad apples. You just got to find the corrupt ones, right? That sure, they can be corrupted, but it's about being vigilant, right? Standing up against them, and so on and so on and so on, right? And also another heavy critique I have for the Batman is that it gives it has that liberal ethos of, oh, we just need to vote harder, right? Like, oh, the problem is that we didn't have the right person in power. We just needed to be voting harder, right? That the whole mayoral election is tied up in the movie, and the idea being that oh, the last guy was corrupt, so we're going to vote for a new person who isn't. So electoral politics works, right? In the meantime, there's literally a billionaire in a fucking Batman suit going around beating up criminals in the streets. You're like, yeah, electoral politics is really working out. And nobody at any point is standing up and asking, why do these people have this much wealth in the first place? Like, what the fuck is that? Like, you guys are talking about, like, power struggles and constant battles and warring as if you're, like, feudal houses. And no one is saying, this seems illegitimate on the face of it. Like, why are we allowing this to persist? I was going to watch it last night, but I opened it up, saw 3 hours. Yeah, 3 hours was a long time, dude. Like, did they earn 3 hours? I don't know. There's a lot of, like, slow motion shit in there that I was a bit like, yeah, okay. You mean like the Sex Pistols doing a reunion tour in the mid-90s, John Lydon proclaiming on stage, "We've got your money." Yeah, like, but like, so I just don't trust these people anymore, yeah. They totally downplayed him having money. It all looked poor. I mean, Batmobile looked pretty sick. Batsuit looked pretty good. They made him bulletproof. The guy literally, like, fell off a building and, like, didn't die. You're right, though. There was, like, a decrepit quality about everything. That Bruce Wayne himself, well, they really leaned into the, like, recluse kind of Bruce Wayne version, right? Like, he wasn't the billionaire playboy. Like, he wasn't surrounded by beautiful women, right? He wasn't even trying to play that role. And that's part of the reason why I say that this character, this Batman, was more Bruce Wayne than I've ever seen, because previous iterations of Batman really have Bruce Wayne being a mask for Batman. That the true character is Batman, and that's fairly well established in the lore of Batman. That Batman is Batman, and Bruce Wayne is a mask. This iteration, Bruce Wayne was not a mask. That Bruce Wayne was Bruce Wayne, and he was suffering. He was suffering with the confusion of being alive in the world, and he obviously doesn't know what to do. Like, I think that really shone through for me. That this iteration, like previous iterations, have Batman, Bruce Wayne, like on a journey, on a path, on a pursuit, right? He's got his shit together and he's going forward with this pursuit. This Batman was lost. This is an aimless, lost soul who didn't know what to do, didn't know who his enemies were, didn't know who liked him or hated him, doesn't know anything about what's going on in the streets he lives in. He's detached in the truest sense of the word, and they did that on purpose. For sure, they did that on purpose. That they really made him clueless as to what was actually going on in his own city, and he just comes across. And it's impossible to believe they didn't understand that this is what they were doing. That he comes across as a lost little boy. That he stopped growing up when he watched his parents get killed. And his solution to the anger and fear and pain that he experienced, the trauma that he experienced, his solution is to use his position of wealth and privilege in order to go beat up bad guys in the street in a suit. Like, he's lost, and nobody around him knows how to help him, right? Like Alfred is enabling him entirely. He completely incapable of understanding how to confront this major problem he obviously has with Bruce. Like, clearly enabling him the entire time. Nobody, like, Bruce Wayne needs a therapist. Like, that boy needs a therapist. He should have been in therapy right away. Right? He should be talking to a therapist about this shit. He shouldn't be getting into a fucking suit and fighting crime like this crazy kind of thing that he's doing. It's insane. Right? It's insane. And the film doesn't really pull punches on that. Like, the echoing of the phrase, "I'm vengeance," that it's something that he himself says, that the Batman says, that I'm vengeance. He gets called Vengeance as a nickname by people throughout the film. And then the villains, as the film go on, begin to say that they themselves are also Vengeance. And Batman begins to see himself in the villains that he is fighting. And that he begins to understand, and ultimately does conclude, that this path of vengeance is not going to be successful. That this is not that is a Sisyphusian pushing of the boulder, a never-ending grind that enforces and reinforces itself, that creates a circle of violence, and the pursuit of vengeance can be very self-destructive. And so he grows as an individual by a minuscule amount, which in this modern day landscape of superhero storytelling puts this film head and shoulders above its peers, because there's an actual arc and the character actually grows. So if this is the floor, like if this is the foundation that they want to move from now, yeah, they could do some interesting stuff here. Like, forget about all the Avengers bullshit, forget about all that Marvel garbage, right? Like, start here and let's move forward from here. Hopefully they don't betray us immediately, which I expect they will, because I don't think they can help themselves. I just don't think they can help themselves. I think that I don't think they're interested in telling good stories. I think that they got this one through on accident, because Joker happened, right? They did Joker, and Joker was a good story, right? Well told. And the studio probably went, oh, people want good stories, well told, and that's what gives us money. And so they told his story, and they did a good story, well told. And then they're going to go, you know what we could do to make even more money? Not do that and just go back to doing schlocky, dumb bullshit like Disney does. Why shouldn't we do what Disney does, right? It's working for Disney. Anyway. What if Confederate States of America declare their independence to preserve and expand chattel slavery? That's a good one, Mocked. That's a good one. Dude. Mocked is pushing back. Okay. To be fair, Mocked, you are introducing a variable, right? Like there's no chattel slavery system in Taiwan. Like, that's not a one-to-one comparison. So, right, like, that's kind of an unfair thing to say in the first place. Because it's not like Taiwan or California has a chattel slavery system. So now you're introducing the idea that there's this section of America that wishes to declare their independence so that they can continue the pursuit of slavery. Yeah, fuck that, right? Fuck that. Fuck that. Good try though, bud. Good try. That is a good one though. Like, yeah, I tend to have a dim view of slavery. Ugh. I know how to get to make a decision. The world leaders need to go see the Council of Katos to make the decision. Oh, of Katos. Yes, we are servants to the almighty cat gods. You got it. All right, enough Batman. I've been talking about Batman too much for like a half hour. I kind of found it funny when they exposed Falcone. Immediately we're going to talk about Batman again. And everything, they were like, oh, never mind the big corruption. What about the Riddler? Like, Falcone didn't matter. Yeah, there's actually some truth to that. Like, it didn't seem like there was much fallout, right? Like, where was the whole, like, the city rips itself apart kind of stuff, right? And then immediately they just, like, pivot into the Riddler, and the Riddler's got a plan. He's going to blow up all of the yabba yabba, right? That, like, the fallout from all of this is kind of left to our imagination. And when they do a second film, are they gonna even bother talking about it? We'll see. Speaking of treaties, anyone see the 40th Central Convention Com Party Discussion Bulletin number 4? Very disappointing, to say the least. I'm sorry to hear that. I haven't seen that. Batman is actually left-wing and his villains are right-wingers. Joker is an incel. Penguin is an evil rich mob boss capitalist. Riddler is an incel but nerdy. I mean, I wouldn't say that Batman is left-wing. Like, a left-wing Batman would be talking about poverty, right? Like, a left-wing Batman would be like, I have billions of dollars. Maybe I could do something about that, about the root of the issue. Because the root of the issue of all of these guys is poverty. Like, who is Riddler, right? Like, this will be a bit spoilery, okay? But I think it's absolutely the case. Riddler is an orphan who is living in grinding poverty, not like, oh man, I'm struggling to pay my rent poverty, but like literal like grinding poverty, where like, where is the food coming from? Where sometimes I don't have shelter, like real fucking poverty. Who was promised by a wealthy society that they were going to renew this society and they were going to do something about this, and is betrayed, right? Grabbing on to that kind of disillusionment energy that exists in a post-Obama America. That Riddler's rage against the system is perfectly understandable to anyone who is under the age of 40. Like, the disillusionment, the sense of betrayal, the anger, right? Like, we can condemn the Riddler for his violence and his crazed behavior, certainly, but it stands upon a foundation, and the foundation itself is quite strong, and you can understand where he's coming from. That's usually how Batman's villains work. You understand where they're coming from. You think about someone like Mr. Freeze. Mr. Freeze is an extremely sympathetic villain. He's doing everything he can to save his wife. Like, it's a very understandable position. The best villains are like that. And if Batman was actually a left-winger, like if Batman was on the left of the spectrum, he would be saying, God damn, how do we eliminate this poverty from our city? How do we eliminate this crazy bullshit from actually starting in the first place? Do you think you'd do it by dressing up in a bat suit and beating the shit out of thugs in the street? Probably not. That sounds to me like a nice right-winger solution. That sounds like a right-wing solution. The way to beat a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun, right? Like the way forward is through violence, the stick. Whereas a left-winger is like, hey, maybe if we eliminated poverty from the society, then the people who we help out of that poverty will... Yeah, just because he's also beating up right-wingers doesn't mean anything. Like, so right-wingers fight right-wingers. Like, yeah. Like, like, just because the people he is beating up are fascists and gangsters and mob bosses doesn't make him left-wing. Like, the right-wing vigilantism that exists within the ethos of the American mind is extraordinarily right-wing. Yeah, Putin is a right-winger. He's fighting against right-wingers. Yeah. Like, what defines the major difference between someone who is on the left and someone who is on the right is that a right-winger fights to defend the structure as it is. That they see the structure of the system as ultimately positive, and that the structure should be maintained, and that the people who fight against that structure should be fought against, right? That we are justified in using violence in order to fight against those who attempt to fight against the system we defend. Right? That's a very right-wing perspective. Whereas the left-wing perspective is at least that the system should be reformed. That what is happening, like, so a liberal position, because liberals are like center left, like take the center and then move direct, like just to the left. And that's, well, or anyway. And they're at least saying, okay, the system as it is good as it is, but we just need to reform it a little bit. And that's a very liberal mindset, right? One could say system, another could use way of life instead. Yeah, I feel like way of life gets used a lot to replace the idea of like a system. I have a very video game look at the society. I use a lot of, like, I think about it in a very video game kind of way. Like when you zoom out on a game of like Sim City, you know, you can see that there's a structure, like there's a system to it for sure. And people have this idea that like, oh, it's our way of life and we've got to protect our way of life. And I'm like, yeah, like you're basically just using a different language to say exactly the same thing. You want to protect your system. You want to protect the traditions, you know, the rules that you have in place in order to maintain your system of values, right? And the yeah, so in order to be on the left of the conversation, you've at least got to be saying we want to reform the system as it is, right? And if you're not at least saying that we want to reform the system as it is, then you're not really on the left. And of course, the further to the left you go, the more you are saying things like we need to replace this system, that the system needs to be done away with. Right? That which is my position completely. That the capitalist system is a failure. We have worthless parasites ruling us, which a movie like The Batman perfectly illustrates. We should be done with them and get rid of them. They're not helping, right? When they do help, they offer their help in the clumsiest, stupidest possible ways they can. By creating like a personal like vigilante gear and a Batmobile and all this crazy shit, right? Like they're not actually attempting to deal with the real problem. They're dealing with their own bullshit. It's just the only difference, which and Riddler explicitly states it in the film. The only difference between someone like Bruce Wayne and someone like the Riddler is that Bruce Wayne has $1 billion, right? So like he gets to use this privilege of his in order to enact this fantasy and get involved in it in the way that he wants to be involved in it, which is as dressing up in this crazy and using his power and authority as this figure in order to gain access, right? Like, Batman gains enormous access into the police force. They literally let a vigilante into crime scenes and shit. And while the cops are, hold on, Batman, atheist. I mean, that's never really addressed. We don't know his position on that. Isn't a nationalist. I mean, he fights for Gotham, right? Like, he believes in Gotham. Like, he spurns his lover at the end of the film in order to stay within the city. Because the city needs me. Doesn't care about nuclear family and marriage. Yeah. Has a charity and foundation. His family has a charity and a foundation. Has an asylum to treat the mentally ill. There is a society to treat the mentally ill. It's the Arkham Asylum. Arkham is a different family than the Wayne family. How is he right wing? For real, dude. Like, Batman is like a right wing vigilante. Like, he's not that much different from somebody like Dog the Bounty Hunter. Like, he uses violence in order to maintain the system and defend it against an evil that in an endless war like, while not actually addressing, like, you could make the argument that his father was a leftist. You could make that argument, but even then, like, there's not much evidence to show that Bruce Wayne's father, Thomas Wayne, was actually going to be successful with this charity and the foundation. And look at how easy it was to corrupt this charity and this foundation. Right? Just like in the real world. Like all of these, the Bill and Gates Melinda, like the Melinda Bill Gates Foundation or whatever it's fucking called. Like, it's a right-wing institution. Like it exists to maintain wealth and power and prestige. Like, he's not giving his money away. He's not actually attempting to address the structural issues. Like, and he is the primary beneficiary of the system as it is. Because to maintain his position as the Batman, right? What does he want to be doing? He wants to go into the streets and beat thugs up. That's what he wants. That's what he wants to do, right? If he didn't want that, he wouldn't do it. And so he's doing that. But if that were to suddenly stop, he wouldn't be able to do that. And so he needs the system to constantly generate thugs. He needs the system to constantly generate people like the Joker and the Riddler for him to constantly wage this perpetual, endless war against, right? And so he doesn't reform the system. He doesn't actually do anything to alleviate poverty. He doesn't address the structural issues that are at play. He doesn't use his wealth in order to do any of this. He instead uses it to militarize himself, to wage an endless war against the mentally ill and poor that he himself is responsible for generating. Batman is a right-winger. Like, like almost definitionally. He's a billionaire who uses his wealth to fight the poor. Like, just because occasionally he also fights gangsters, just because occasionally he also fights other people who are also right-wing, doesn't mean that he's suddenly a leftist. Like, Batman's a right-winger. Firmly on the right of the conversation. The more interesting question to have is Batman a fascist or not? That's the more interesting question. I have a question. Who cares? Well, we're talking about American myths. That's what this conversation's about, Watson. Like, these figures, Superman, Batman, Iron Man, like these figures, these are the American religious figures, right? That's the reason why I care. Because, like, we don't worship Jesus Christ in this society. We pretend to, but we don't worship old gods, right? Like, Thor made the cut. We don't worship any of these old ancient figures anymore, though. Like Zeus, right? Do we really care about Zeus? Like Poseidon, like these kinds of guys. Like, they show up, but we worship superheroes. Superheroes are the figures that receive our attention and our worship. And it's worth critiquing these stories and these because it tells us what we as a society are willing to accept, right? That if they made one of these movies and the hero of the film wasn't in some way aligning with our values or wasn't aligning or understandable to us, we would reject them. And that would be interesting as well and worthy of commentary as well. And a figure like the Batman is especially interesting to comment on because he's so tied up in the idea of class and the class war that's going on. The like, he as a figure for decades we were supposed to worship simply because he was a billionaire fighting crime. Right? Like simply, oh, he's a billionaire fighting crime. And nobody was saying of Batman for the longest time, hey, wait a minute. Like, this guy only exists because of the poverty he creates. Like, nobody would say that. Right? This is a very new sort of idea that has finally kind of made it into the mainstream conversation. And that movies like Joker, movies like Batman are beginning to allow that question to get asked more seriously to a mass public. That you and I can talk about these sorts of things in our theory, right? We can read Lenin and we can read Stalin, we could read Trotsky, we could read Mao, like we could read all the we could read Marx, like we could read all this kind of stuff and talk about poverty and all that. That's not how the populace communicates. It's not how it that's not how it speaks to itself. That the populace speaks to itself through pop culture. And the popular culture right now is, without a doubt, superhero shit, right? It seems to be on a wane, seems to be that the populace is getting restless with it, but it's still there. It's still persisting. It's still an important part, like as important as the Greek pantheon was to the Greeks. Like these people are these figures exist in our ethos and are worthy of our criticism and are worthy of our attention. It's an interesting discussion, fictional characters' political views, yeah. Have you seen Impotent Rage from GTA? I have not. Was Paul Bunyan an American Legion thug? He had an axe. Yeah, like we don't care about Paul Bunyan anymore. Like, Paul Bunyan's out of the conversation. We don't care. Because it's a movie and it's cool and cool things are cool. Man, the actor who did Trevor is good. Love that dude. He was in Frozen Train. Yeah, fiction can reflect on our sensibilities. Yeah, that's exactly right. And like, fiction is as real as nonfiction. Like, we don't like to talk about it that way. So like, here's some, let's talk about the Bible, right? People will always throw at me, well, Jesus isn't real, who cares? And I'm going like, who cares if Jesus is real or not? It's like, and of course evangelical types really get up their own ass about it, right? Like, evangelicals get really like, Jesus of course is real, we got this, that, and then all, and then there's that, and they'll do everything they can to really die on the hill if Jesus was real. But people don't know how to deal with me, because I go, it's fucking irrelevant. It doesn't matter at all. Jesus Christ is fictional. Okay. He's still one of the most influential figures in society for the last 2,000 years. Right? Everybody knows who he is. Everybody at least knows the basics of the story of Christ. Right? He's one of the most powerful stories ever told. Obviously, we're still talking about it today. It doesn't matter. It's completely irrelevant. Like, and in fact, I make the argument that if he was a fictional character that they made up, well, doesn't that just tell you the power of story? Doesn't it just tell you how much power stories have and narratives have? Right? Doesn't that just reinforce this idea that we have to be critiquing fiction and have to be critiquing the shit that's coming out of our society? Yeah, Jesus was if Jesus existed and was walking around, he was without a doubt brown and for sure left wing. Jesus was a communist, man. Superman is right wing. Aquaman is libertarian. Flash is progressive. Cyborg is a communist. Wonder Woman is a conservative. Is Superman's a whole other ball of wax, dude. Like, there's a reason why they can't make a good Superman movie, and it's because the people who are making Superman movies don't believe in the values that Superman believes in. Like, or that what Superman represents, right? But Superman is, of course, like, the perfect, like, when we say, like, oh, the aliens, please come and save us, right? We're essentially saying Superman, right? We would be fine if Superman showed up and was like a cool dude. It was basically like, what's up? any mainstream revolutionary or Marxist stories out there that don't end up being great man theory devolving into status quo Western sensibilities? Yeah, good question, JR. Right? Like, are there actually like just communist stories, right? Like, are there stories of a society? The closest I've ever seen is probably A Bug's Life, right? Like, what's the story of A Bug's Life? It's the story of a group of ants that are dealing with the oppressive tyranny of a cricket regime that's being inflicted on them. And they just put together that the way to defeat these crickets is for the ants to all stand up at once and say, and get rid of these crickets. Right? That's pretty mainstream revolutionary or Marxist, right? Like the proletariat should seize the means of production from the bourgeoisie, right? Watch A Bug's Life. It's super communist, like all the way. It doesn't really mean whatever Jesus existed or not. He's still one of the most influential figures in world history. Exactly one. Like, exactly. In the last couple of days, I've been learning more about neo-Marxist and where the concept comes from. What it turns out is that there's some truth into it, as was right-winger accusation. Abandon the class of material analysis and rather focus on cultural identity issues, which CRT, identity politics, came out of that tradition. I mean, okay, like, yeah, like there is like a race or cultural identity analysis that comes out of Marx. I wouldn't describe it as right wing though. Like, Superman is lawful good. He kind of transcends, or at least he's supposed to, I thought. Yeah, like Superman's not really a person. Like he's just like a grouping of ideology, right? Like he's an ideal. And the thing that we're struggling with in this society right at this point is like, how do you tell a story about Superman who's supposed to be for truth and justice and the American way, when it's become so obvious that America is corrupted to its core? Like, how do you actually have Superman, like, if Superman went and fought against the Iraqis in the Iraq War, like if Superman was like fighting in Libya, right? Like, would you think he'd be truth and justice in the American way? Like, it's one thing to have Superman like fight Nazis and shit. Like, that's one thing. But like, how does Superman survive in this world when he's supposed to be like an icon of Americanism, when it's become patently obvious to the vast majority of the citizens of the planet that America is deeply corrupt? Even CRT was influenced by Malcolm X's idea of black nationalism. The one thing that these body of thought they believe that scientific research or research should be made to make. I was saying that people like Jordan Peterson's accusation of left has been postmodernist neo-Marxism has some merit, but it is a cloak in a lot of lies. Look, I think that Peterson's usage of postmodern neo-Marxist, like all that language, just shows you that he's clueless. That's all. It's just cluelessness, right? Like, I don't think Peterson actually knows what he's talking about. Pretty flatly. And I don't actually think he can have serious discussions, right? Like guys like he gets into conversations with guys like Sam Harris, and Sam Harris just looked at him and said, "What are you even talking about, bro?" Like, that's essentially what Sam Harris said to Peterson, right? If you go and watch, he just was like, "What are you talking about, man?" Because what are you talking about, man? And then he talks to Zizek, and Zizek's like, "Who are these people you're talking about?" And Peterson's like, makes a list on Twitter of like 10 people. Like, look, man, Peterson has schizophrenia. Right? He denies that he's got it. Okay? He doesn't want to medicate for it. Right? He keeps doing crazy things and saying outlandish shit because he's a man who is suffering from a mental illness he refuses to get treated. That's who Peterson actually is. Like, he doesn't know what he's talking about. That's all. We let a dude go into a room and write a book for 15 years. It's this fucking thick. And every so often he'd come out of the room and talk to a bunch of kids about it. Right? And what's the book? Just kind of madness. Just kind of fucking madness. Like watching Jordan Peterson at this point is just watching someone struggle with their own madness. That's really what it is. And it's the reason why people find him fascinating, by the way. Right? That when you're watching him, you're just watching someone struggle with their own madness, and you can appreciate that. Right? Because you feel a little mad too. Right? Like a little crazy. Right? Lots of people feel a little crazy. And so now they're watching someone doing it publicly. And they're like, oh, okay. Popcorn, eat popcorn. Well, that's an interesting point the crazy guy said. Isn't that interesting? Like, I don't mean to be dismissive of the serious issues that he's ignoring in himself, but like, I'm at a point with this guy where I'm not willing to engage him in ideas because I can't take it seriously anymore. The guy's walking around saying, clean your room. Take your meds, Jordan. Eat your vegetables. Like, stop putting your racist, dumb bullshit into the atmosphere and empowering literal neo-Nazis and fascists in the society. Quit it. Take your meds. Go to sleep. Homelander, yeah, that's exactly it. Homelander is actually more true to our ethos than Superman is now. Like, we recognize Homelander. Like, when Homelander comes on the screen and acts the way he does, we're like, yep. I get it. Yep. Superman comes on screen and acts the way that Superman does, and he's just foreign to us. Like, it just doesn't make sense to us anymore. Like, he's who is he even fighting for? Like, he's not fighting for us, obviously. He's not fighting to help us. Like, and he goes and he like just fights like some intergalactic being that's so beyond our ken that it might as well just be like, and the spaghetti monster fought the god emperor Zusuflalaga. And you're like, okay. Like, it doesn't connect with us anymore. It doesn't make sense to us. It's and the storytellers don't even really understand why they're telling the story that they're telling. Like, watch basically every single Superman movie past Superman 1. Right? Like, literally the Christopher Reeve Superman 1. And it really does come across as storytellers being like, I don't really know why we're telling this story. Like, who is this guy and why is he, like, what's he doing? Like, what's he even here doing? What's he fighting for? What are these values? It just seems like if they're making the story at all, it's for the kind of hope that maybe one day some force in the world will fight for some idea like truth. I don't see it. An Emily suggestion in Discord of the 3-body problem was a good read, besides his weird gender commentary and weird take on China's cultural revolution. Okay. No, it wasn't Sam Cedar. Sam Harris. Sam Harris sat down with Peterson. And I don't like Harris. Like, I think Harris is a racist and a xenophobe. He's written some of the most cartoonishly racist shit you'll ever see about Muslims. But like, even a guy like him was able to look through Peterson and be like, what are you talking about, bro? Peterson, now regular on the Ben Shapiro's Daily Wire. Yeah, that's all you need to know about where Peterson is coming from. Yeah, I mean, I have a theory. Intervention probably turned Joe Rogan, Jordan Peterson, Tim Pool crazy. Ivermectin probably turned Joe Rogan, Jordan Peterson, and Tim Pool crazy. No, dude, money. Money does that. Right? Like, when I listen to Joe Rogan's stuff, which I do from time to time, because I've got, like, you know, the long format, all this kind of stuff, and he does have good guests on, it's pretty clear it's the money. Like, it's pretty obvious. Like, Joe Rogan's detached. Like, he's just detached from the lived experiences of the majority. He doesn't live in the world anymore, right? He lives in his compound where he does his martial arts. He goes hunting every so often with his gun nut buddies, right? He goes and does, like, comedy shows and stuff. Like, so he's living the life of a prince. And the people he talks to on the regular for his, like, podcast are people who he's, like, summoning to his studio. So, like, he doesn't know what's going on. He doesn't see poverty. He doesn't know what it looks like. He doesn't know what it is. He doesn't understand where it comes from. He just is like, grind set. Just grind set, bro. This is the only thing that makes sense to him, because his ascension into the position he has is senseless. It's completely it's completely senseless what's happened to Joe Rogan. That he literally is just and same thing with Tim Pool, and same thing with Jordan Peterson. It doesn't make sense at all. They've ascended to the position in the society they're in, and it's completely fucking random. And the only thing that they can grab hold of to make it make sense to them themselves is grind set, bro. Grind set. While being completely ignorant of the fact that fucking everybody's grind set, you dumb fuck. Like, everybody in the fucking society is grind set. Nobody's not grind setting. They're just not grind setting at your stupid shit. Everybody's working their asses off. Everybody's trying to do their best with the chips that they've been given. Everybody's trying to make it happen. And the people who ascend and who capture the power of the zeitgeist and who become the cultural icons don't become that way because they're grind setting, because fucking everybody is. They become that way because it's senseless and random. That, 100 million people looked at Joe Rogan once. Like, that's it. That's it. That's what it does. That's all it takes. If everybody in the world looks at someone once, one time, that person is world famous and is in the consciousness. And it's senseless and random when it happens. It doesn't make sense. And so they're trying to make sense of something that is by its very definition senseless. And the only thing that they can come up with is, I'm great. Good for you, bro. Good for you. Yeah, Rogan backing the likes of DeSantis isn't shocking at all. Yeah. Seems like some... Yeah, y'all see Rogan endorse DeSantis? Yeah, like, because what matters to him is wealth. That's all. Like, there's nothing else that matters anymore. He cares about wealth. Sam Harris is an intellectual Mark Stein? Who's Mark Stein? Why does this sound familiar? Mark Stein. Mark Stein. I don't know who this guy is. If someone says that Scandinavia doesn't do imperialism, just tell them that Norway used slave labor in Portuguese Mozambique and Sweden bombed Libya. Yeah. This comes back to the monopoly experiments with the rich and the poor, where the rich all believe they won because of their skill rather than their privilege. Yeah. We can run that as many times as we want. All right. we've been chatting about some nonsense for a little bit. Let's chat about something more serious. Main Street Research poll, right? This is a Main Street Research survey, right? That came out. In the recent provincial election, how did you vote? 55% didn't vote. 10% voted NDP. 11% voted Liberal. 19% voted Conservative. Again, I would like to reiterate, this is an absolute devastating embarrassment for the NDP. They should be shocked. They should be appalled at what happened in this last election. This absolute repudiation. So what's the next question? Right? And of course they break it out by age and gender, so if you care about this, right? But broken up by region, right? So again, if you care about this, broken up by education. So again, if you care about this, right? But what really matters, which of the following reasons best describes why you did not vote? 9% didn't have time. So working, right? I got kids and shit, right? Didn't have time. 9% just forgot, right? So the same amount of people who just straight up forgot, also just didn't have time. So, life. So 18% of the electorate is basically just like, oh yeah, okay. I'm a kind of a dumb guy and I'm a bit busy, okay? Leave me alone. So 20% didn't feel your vote mattered, right? Didn't feel your vote mattered. 16% didn't feel the campaign had any meaning. A whopping, overwhelming 46%, the largest piece of this pie by a large measure, didn't feel that any of the candidates would be meaningfully different. This is a complete and total indictment of the NDP. This poll right here. The populace literally looking at Andrea Horwath, looking at Doug Ford, and saying these two are the same. That is an indictment of the NDP as an idea, as a concept in the world. That the populace looked at the worst premier in the history of the nation, turned and looked at Andrea Horwath and the NDP and said the same. It's over. Like, it's over. Like, that the populace is not going to support any of these parties for any reason except one, which is that they have to actually say that capitalism is the crisis. But if you actually go to the NDP and you say that, they say, that'll alienate the moderates. You guys seem to be alienating the moderates all by yourself. You don't need help alienating the moderates. Right? You literally have 55% of the populace saying that they didn't vote. Almost 50% of them say that you are the same as the conservatives. Wah, 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 wah. Wonk. Get completely fucked, NDP. You suck. You're a worthless party. Disband. Get out of here. Fuck off. Like, you're not helping. I wonder if the breakdown is of people who did vote and also felt their vote didn't matter, but they voted anyway. Yeah, this is of no, but which of the following reasons best describe why you did not vote? So it would be what you did not vote. Like, and then of course that's broken up by age and gender if these things matter to you. Are you satisfied with the outcome of the election? This is all voters. Very satisfied, 21%. Somewhat satisfied, 26%. Very dissatisfied, 38%. Somewhat dissatisfied, 15%. So the majority, by a little, are dissatisfied with the result of the election, with the minority, by a little, being somewhat or very satisfied. Like 47% of the populace is like, this is fine. Of the voters, rather, of the voting base. And what's wild about that stat is that only 19% of the vote went to conservatives. Right? So 19% of the vote goes to conservatives, but 47% of the populace is fine with it. Baffling. What percentage of Ontario do you think cast a ballot in the recent provincial election? I don't understand this graph at all, honestly. 30 to 39%, 30% of people. Oh, I get it now. Right. So, like, what percentage of Ontario do you think cast a ballot? So 45% of the populace said 40 to 49%. Only 14% said 50 to 59%. 10% said over 60%. So we've got 10% of people who don't know what's going on at all, right? 30% of people who have a dim view, but on the negative side. 45% accuracy, because it was 45% turnout, right? And then 14% that are just a little off, right? You got to like almost double that, 19% because 55% non-participants, right? So this is all the people who voted. So if you voted, you get involved in this, but like, even if you have 19%, it shouldn't equal, I guess, does it? Yeah, it's like 38%, but this is 47%. So there's like 10% of the populace. Probably liberals, right? Probably the liberals who are like, well, what are you going to do? The actual turnout percentage was 43% of eligible voters. Do you think this number is too high, too low, or about right? Too high. 4%. So 4% of the society is like, that's a lot. 23% being like, yeah, that's about right. 43% of the populace seems about right. A whopping super majority 73%. Too low. Like, at least the populace understands. Yeah, that seems low. Seems low. Why can I submit my taxes online, but I can't vote online? You know, Zed, I don't think it would matter at all. I don't think it would change anything. Straight up. I think maybe you would capture like a little bit more people. Yeah, we talked about that already, bud. Did you hear about the Green Party candidate in North Carolina denied by third Dem vote from running for office, even though they had way more than enough verified signatures? Yeah. It's not a democracy. Right? Like, that kind of story is, like, it's the kind of story that you would think would be scandalous, but I don't actually consider scandalous. Because I've already concluded that it's not a democracy. So, yeah, that's what they do. Right? Shotgun noises. We here at the Canadian Commie do not espouse violence. Please do not ban my channel again, YouTube. Do you think that Ontario should adopt mandatory voting where everyone casts a ballot or pays a small fine, like in Australia? That's an interesting question. 20% strongly agree, so we should adopt mandatory voting. 23% somewhat agree. 18% somewhat disagree. And the largest block is 39% at strongly disagree. I find myself on the strongly disagree side of it as well. If anything, I think the option should be that we should have a none of these guys option. Like, that would be the change that I would want to see into the electoral system. Right? Like, we should have a none of the above. We should be able to go into the ballot box and click a little box that says none of these losers. These are all losers. Get rid of all of these losers. Why any of these guys? Fuck all of them. Right? Like, then I would actually start believing that we live in a real democracy. If the people could say out, then you would get these like worthless candidates who all are the same and completely capitulated by capital, and we could all revolt by electoral politics. We could build revolution into the political system by simply saying we reject all options. And if the entire populace says, yeah, what? No, then they're gone. Next. Next, please. Next, please. Right? I think that'd be a fun way to do it. I think we should have a none of the above candidate. Like, we should definitely, like, nix this dumb bullshit. Do you think Ontario should continue its first past the post electoral system, or should it adopt a different system? Most people say we should change the system. 56%. 44% continue with the current system. So, it's a slight majority think that we should change the system. If Ontario were to change to a different voting system, would you prefer a ranked ballot system, where voters rank their choice for their representative in their riding? A proportional system where voters cast a single vote for the party that they want the most seats? Or would you stick with the first past the post system? So, I love this stat because it's like 44% are saying like, yeah, we should continue with the same system. But they're like, yeah, but if we did change it. And then they're like, you know what? 14% of those people were like, okay, if we are going to change it. Basically even Stevens, like, keep it ranked ballot, proportional system. I don't think that people genuinely know. And I tend to take, like, the problem isn't with the system. The problem is with the interaction of the populace, right? And as far as I'm concerned, the populace has made itself perfectly clear, right? That, like, this right here is the story in my view. Why didn't you show up? Why didn't you vote? Didn't feel like the candidates would be meaningfully different. They're the same. Like, it's not going to matter if you change it to a ranked ballot or proportional or any of that kind of stuff. Like, it's not going to alter that. If all the candidates are bought by capitalists, right, are owned by the oligarchy, people aren't going to show up to support because there's no difference here. Who gives a shit? Democracy, monarchy, republic, the noun doesn't matter. What matters is the verbs, the data, the action to be taken. That's exactly it. It's our interaction with it. And are we finally getting to a point where we're beginning to realize as a populace that we need to be taking to the streets? That we need to be actually fighting back? That we need to actually be protesting and causing problems? With the Roe v. Wade decision, I'm seeing more and more Americans saying, like, hey, these guys have addresses and they live places. I'm like, okay, great. That's fun to say out loud. It's another to do, right? It's another to actually pursue and actually do it. Who in their right minds would want to be engaged in politics in this sort of environment? Not me. I mean, yeah, when the communists are censored, capitalists always win. Pikachu shock face. Yep. Like, and the populace is seeing through it. They're seeing through it. Like, they know that these candidates are the same. That they work for the same people. They know. They're telling us they know. Right? Like, people want actual change. People want different options. People want a political class that actually says different things and actually fights for a structural difference. People want it, obviously, and we're not getting it. And why not? Because to reach the highest level of politics, you get bought. You're corrupt. That's how it works. Oh, you guys are calling numbers. You guys are calling numbers. We got 12 people watching. Oop, I hit the wrong thing. That's funny. I could like... All right, today's number.
Here we go for today's number. It's June 30.
Everybody's in on 7, eh?
22. 10 balls. Each ball has a number. Numbers 1 through 10.
Oof.
Swirl the numbers.
Swirl the numbers.
Hit a number.
Ken Cincos. Good to see you, bud.
Today's number
Here we go.
is
Here we go.
5.
Watson. Ba 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 ba. Ba 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 ba. Ba 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 ba. Christopher De Silva. Good to see you, bud. Good to see you, bud. Man, I gotta do better with my technical stuff. Like, I'm looking at this. This looks terrible. My audio is terrible. Thank you so much for listening to this terrible audio, guys. Most people, that's the reason why you see all these YouTubers, and they've all got the thing like right up here, right? I need to get a better setup. Get one of those going on so you guys can actually hear me without the echo or any of that kind of stuff. Right? Yeah. Got to fix the audio. Yeah, I know, dude. I know. I'm working on it. I'm just one dude. Trying to make it happen. Good opportunity to say like, share, subscribe. Right? Like, share, subscribe. If you've got $1 jangling around in that pocket. No glasses yet either. Nope, not yet, Methane. They're coming. All right. We are in a social crisis right now. HRM calls for guaranteed basic income. As the Halifax Regional Council is calling on the provincial and federal governments to provide a livable basic income for all. Not going to happen. Like, call for it all you want. I have sent, hey, Demand Better, how you doing, bud? I have sent information to the basic income groups saying, hey, we're having a protest to fight for a raise to ODSP and all this. These people are not willing to actually do what needs to be done. Very straightforwardly. These guys are essentially careerists. Like, it's actually pretty staggering to watch. That we're watching, like, the level of political engagement that you would expect to be at the protest level, which would be third-party, non-affiliated groups, are essentially suckering themselves into believing that what they need to do is play nice. That's what needs to be done in order to get what they want, is to play nice and to be friendly with these people. And it's total bullshit. Like, if you play nice with these guys, they're going to ignore you. And I'm shocked that the basic income movement isn't even attempting to take to the streets in serious protest. Right? Like, the last time that the basic income group had a protest, it essentially amounted to a photo op for a couple of politicians, and then they did everything they could to diffuse the energy of the protest as fast as possible. Broke it up into little groups, things like this. And we have to be actually fomenting real protest. Like, if you are around the city of Toronto at all, think about coming August 1st, 4 p.m., Bloor and Bedford. We need as many people as we can make happen. And nothing's going to happen unless we do something about it. Like, nothing is going to happen unless there is an actual genuine protest. That's why, like, I see these HRM, like, I see these groups, the Halifax Regional Council, and, like, all this kind of, like, we're calling for basic income. Yeah, good for you. Like, you're calling for it. Great. Like, the political class is not responding rationally any longer. It's not actually interested in improving the society. That's not its goal. It's not trying to. Right? The political class exists to serve wealth exclusively. It doesn't care at all about the needs of the populace. Right? Like, it only cares insofar as it needs to understand how many cops to put on the street to beat people up. Like, and if we don't actually fight back through genuine protest, and so I've completely given up on basic income movements. Like, they're weak. They're not actually interested in fighting back. They're doing everything they can to just diffuse power into the political system, and that's all that's ever going to happen. They're not actually interested in pushing the agenda forward, and in fact, I've become quite convinced that many of them are just angling to be part of the Liberal Party or the NDP Party. That many of them want a job. That's what they're trying to achieve. Hey DM, how you doing, bud? Good to see you. Oh yeah, let's pivot to international news. This is a fun thing I found. So Stepan Bandera, we all know who Stepan Bandera is, right? A Nazi collaborator during World War II, helped erect the concentration camps in Ukraine, right? Should be a nationally reviled figure, but is in fact considered a hero, even by people like Zelensky, right? I've never heard of him. Yeah. So Stepan Bandera's grandson, Stefan, is a news producer in Canada, covering Ukraine, who has helped produce more than 30 documentaries for CTV News. Like, isn't that fun? Isn't that fun? Isn't it fun that our news media is literally allowing the grandchildren of, like, Nazi war criminals to make documentaries at all? Forget about what they're making, but, like, producing documentaries about Ukraine. Shouldn't we be a bit concerned about bias? Shouldn't we be a bit like, hey, CTV, do you, like, tell people that this guy is Stepan Bandera's grandson when he's making these 30 documentaries for CTV News? Like, do you let people know? Because familial politics is much more powerful and much stronger than national politics or local politics or municipal politics, right? Like, familial politics is much, much deeper. And without a doubt, the grandson of Stepan Bandera, when he's covering Ukraine, is going to do so from a fairly specific perspective, right? So the grandson of a Nazi collaborator is creating flowery material on a corporate TV network. Bell Media owns CTV. Yeah. Corporatism. Yeah. While supportive of UBI out of necessary to do something, I always preferred a UBN necessities and rec for and art for all type thing. I'd volunteer to be a farmhand and offer to go first. Who's with me? Oh yeah, like a jobs program, right? Like that's a very left-wing sort of thing. I mean, that's what happened under FDR, right? The New Deal was very much like yeah, we did the David Lynch number. It was a 5. Watson won. Good for you, buddy. Make sure you go buy that lottery ticket. Go verb the noun. Do the stuff. Bells and whistles. They blackmail or threaten the jobs of people who ask these questions. Yeah. Yeah, a UBI protest once a year is not enough. Well, and especially if like 50 people show up and they do everything they can to dismantle it. You know what, guys? I keep looking at this and I'm unhappy with this. I'm unhappy with this. I'm going to try something. Let's try something. I'm doing something different. Hey, how you guys doing? I'm unhappy. I'm going to try something. Because it's like kind of fuzzy. I want it closer is what I want. This. Come here. Are you... I know, we're getting into like weird territory now, guys. We're getting into weird territory where I'm like messing with the camera while we're doing the stream. The problem is that it's... You know what? I'm going to stop that. I'm going to stop that for now. Yeah, forget that. I just think it looks bad, and I need to do something about the audio. Constantly improving. Awesome nostrils. Thanks, bud. I need that webcam to be closer. I need this to be closer. Like, because the audio that is coming through is really bad. Gotta do something to improve it. So, changes. Like, I feel like the stream is right now how I look, which is just like disheveled, like got this dumb bullshit going on. Like, everything's just kind of working, sort of. All right. Speaking of kind of working, sort of, NATO pivots to highlight Chinese challenges for first time. NATO has, for the first time, singled out China as one of its strategic priorities for the next decade, warning about its growing military ambitions, confrontational rhetoric towards Taiwan and other neighbors, and increasingly close ties to Russia. While Russia's war against Ukraine has dominated discussions at the NATO summit, China earned a place Wednesday among the Western Alliance's most worrying security concerns. China is substantially building up its military forces, including nuclear weapons, bullying its neighbors, threatening Taiwan, monitoring and controlling its own citizens through advanced technology, and spreading Russian lies and disinformation, Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said after presenting NATO's 10-year strategic concept. China is not our adversary, Stoltenberg said, but we must be clear-eyed about the serious challenges it represents. The strategic document directed its harshest language at Russia, but the mere mention of China was significant. The 2010 document did not discuss China. The official turn by NATO puts the world's largest military alliance based on the United States Armed Forces on guard against China, which has the world's second largest economy and a rapidly growing military, both in numbers and in top-notch technology. One of the things that China is doing is seeking to undermine the rules-based international order that we adhere to, that we believe in, that we helped build, said U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken. And if China is challenging it one way or another, we will stand up to that. China has yet to condemn Russia's 4-month-long war against Ukraine and has criticized sanctions brought against Moscow by NATO members. A year ago, Russia and China extended a friendship treaty promising even more strategic cooperation, in defending their common interests. That was followed up in November with an agreement to strengthen their military ties. Weeks before Russia's February invasion, Chinese leader Xi Jinping hosted his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin for a summit at which they pledged a partnership that had no limits. Western leaders are concerned that Russia's aggression in Ukraine could embolden China to be more assertive over Taiwan. China considers Taiwan a part of its territory with no right to independent recognition as a state or representation on the world stage. Speaking at an event in Madrid that was not part of the NATO summit, British Foreign Secretary Liz Truss said that unless China is checked, there is a real risk that they draw the wrong idea, which results in a catastrophic miscalculation, such as invading Taiwan, referring to the self-governing island that China claims as a province. However, in a move interpreted to show that it was somewhat uneasy over the war in Ukraine, China voted to abstain in a United Nations motion to demand Russia halt its attack. China has greatly increased its diplomatic reach via foreign investment, above all in Central Asia and Africa. Now it is seeking to match that with greater military might, especially in the South China Sea, where it has built bases on disputed islands. The U.S. Navy has pushed back by conducting drills in those waters. The gathering of world leaders in Madrid, both inside the NATO summit and on its sidelines, included many from Asian nations. It was the first time that the leaders of Japan, North Korea, Australia, and New Zealand were invited to a NATO summit. They participated in a NATO session on new global challenges after holding a side meeting outside of the summit. And United States President Joe Biden sat down with the leaders of Japan and South Korea. Following what he called a very successful meeting with the other three Pacific nations, Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese called for China to finally denounce Russia's aggressions. Earlier on Wednesday, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian said that NATO members had been creating tensions and provoking conflicts by sending warships and aircrafts into areas close to the Asian mainland and the South China Sea. NATO should give up the Cold War mentality, zero-sum game, and the practice of creating enemies, and not try to mess up Asia and the whole world after disrupting Europe, Zhao said. A surveillance aircraft controlled by NATO member Canada was recently intercepted by a Chinese fighter in international airspace. Canadian officials called the Chinese pilot's action reckless. Beijing continues to claim it is neutral in the Ukraine war, and it has accused NATO and the US of provoking Russia into military action. Facts have proven that sanctions are not a way out of conflicts, said the continued delivery of weapons will not realize peace, Zhao said. NATO allies debated fiercely over how to frame their approach toward China. High-level Spanish and French diplomatic officials told the Associated Press that their delegations insisted on China being considered a challenge and not a threat like Russia. But one thing was clear: ignoring China was no longer an option. The challenges we all face are truly global, Stoltenberg told the Western allies. The international balance of power is shifting, and strategic competition is on the rise. Something I wanted to bring forward, right? Because we're hearing more and more, and we're going to continue hearing more and more about BRICS, right? BRICS is the acronym coined to the associate five major emerging economies: the Federative Republic of Brazil, the Russian Federation, the Republic of India, the People's Republic of China, and the Republic of South Africa. The BRICS members are known for their significant influence on world affairs. Since 2009, the governments of the BRICS states have met annually at formal summits. China hosted the most recent 14th BRICS summit on June 24th, 2022, virtually. Originally, the first four were grouped as BRIC, or the BRICS, before the induction of South Africa in 2010. They have a combined area of 30, you don't care about this, blah, 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 blah. 4 out of the 5 members, 4 of the 5 members are among the world's largest countries by population, by area, and GDP, except for South Africa, which is 23rd in both. Members of G20 as of 2018, these 5 states had a combined nominal GDP of 19.6 trillion, about 23.2% of the gross world product, a combined GDP of around 40.55 trillion, and an estimated 4.46 trillion in combined foreign reserves. The BRICS have received praise and criticism. Bilateral relations among BRIC states are conducted mainly based on non-interference, equality, and mutual benefit. The existence of the BRICS grouping does not signify a formal or informal alliance. There are multiple economic, territorial, and political disputes among the 5 governments. But this basically means that these guys want to be buddies, right? Sure, there's disputes, as there are always disputes, right? But these guys are like 5 buddies. They're like 5 dudes, got into a room with one another, and they're like, yeah, we're going to be buddies. Look at us, right? Here's your team diversity squad, by the way, right? You notice how that, like, look at this diverse group of handsome gentlemen right here, right? The audio's fine, just when playing video. Top of your head should be closer to the top of the screen. Yeah, I can do that right now. Watch. Ooh. Yeah. Is it fuzzy? Do I look fuzzy? That's the thing I'm concerned about. You guys got to see my beautiful face. I got to be like, hey. It's all about me, don't you know? That's what it's all about. It's all about me. Yeah, right. You're fine, John. Thanks, DM. I hope they pay you overtime tomorrow. I mean, that's a big reason why I am working, right? Like, the little bit of extra money, right? I need a little bit of extra money. The reason why I'm getting really worried about the video and the audio, guys, is like, I worry that the algorithm doesn't spread my shit around because it's like, oh, your audio sucks, right? Your video sucks. So it doesn't spread it around because it's picking up that kind of dumb garbage. So I'm getting really, like, anal about it. Especially as I'm, like, changing things around in my living space. Anyway. I'm not certain I'd be a fan of the likes of Modi, Putin, and Bolsonaro. But what matters, Watson, like, the reason why I'm bringing it up is not for us to be a fan. But, like, this arrangement is for sure one of the most powerful agreements and one of the most powerful groups that exists in the world, right? Like, these 2 guys represent the 2 most populous countries on the planet, right? Like, that's a huge group right there that we simply can't ignore. Like, and I feel like the reason we don't hear so much about these guys, right? Like, BRICS population 3.2 billion. G7 population 777 million. Right? Like, who's actually running the place? Who's actually in charge of this thing? And I mean, you can see, like, the BRIC, like, that's Dilma, right? So, like, Bolsonaro is not necessarily the driving force. He just knows what's good for him. Oh, you got to be... Well, and honestly, damn, like, one thing I've noticed is since the Roe v. Wade decision, it does seem like the algorithm is more sensitive. It seems like they've done something for sure. Well, then we're talking about the potential imperialist spheres of influence. Lenin spoke of imperialism, the highest state of capitalism, potentially imperialist. That's the big question, right? Like, that's always been the question for me. Like, if we're looking at the world map, like, right now, as far as I'm concerned, right, like, we've discussed at length on this channel what I think about what's going on in Ukraine, right? That that it was less Putin going like, I want Ukraine, and more him being drawn into a larger conflict. The Donbass War, right? Like, it's just a continuation of the Donbass War, and we can get into that, but if we're not going to be talking about the Donbass War, then I'm not really interested in talking about it. Like, the leftist voices are happy to talk about NATO encroachment, right? I don't really care about NATO encroachment that much. Like, sure, NATO encroachment, right? Fine. The Donbass War, in my view, is the thing to talk about. It's certainly the thing to talk about. And I feel like Putin gets drawn into this conflict, right? Like, it's not like he like, I genuinely think that if it was up to Putin, he would have preferred not to have done it, right? But it isn't actually up to Putin. Like, there are larger forces at play. And but I haven't seen, like, what's China doing to really indicate that it's going on a big military excursion that's can be considered imperialist, right? Like, the struggles that these nations are facing are the struggles that all nations face. And the conversation of Taiwan is a border dispute. Every nation has border disputes. Like, every nation has border disputes. It's just that this particular border dispute is really being rung like a bell by the West over and over again so that it can use it to inflame war, right? Like, just because China's big, and don't get me wrong, like, the question of will China become an imperialist nation itself is always the question. Like, what makes a nation imperialist? What's the tipping point? And it is debatable. Like, there's no consensus about what makes something an empire or this. But I mean, a big one would be colonies, right? That you don't really have a claim to empire if you don't have any colonies. If you're not actually owning territory outside of your national borders, right? So, like, what are the new American colonies, right? Iraq, Israel, for sure. Like, Afghanistan for a while. Now, who the fuck knows what's going on in Afghanistan, right? Like, anytime they go in and, like, bomb a place like Libya, anytime they're going in and, like, overthrowing this kind of stuff, you could even make the argument that in many ways Europe has become just a vassalized state of the United States. So the influence that the United States has in the world is fairly significant, and based almost exclusively on military might and military power. Whereas China seems to just be making a series of trade deals and negotiations. And people can be skeptical of that, I suppose, but they're not, like, doing big giant bombing campaigns and shit. Which they could very much turn that corner, right? Afghanistan marked the beginning of the end. In my view, I actually think the far more significant moment for the decline of the American empire internationally on the stage was what happened in Chile. I think what happened in Chile, to me, is what I would point to. Like, Afghanistan was something of an inevitability. Like Afghanistan was always just a black hole, right? They didn't know why they were there. They didn't know what they were doing. They didn't know what they didn't know what they were up to. They didn't know what to do, right? Like, whereas Chile, I think, has more significance because that's really where the neoliberal agenda began. That was really where neoliberalism really began its statement. Yeah, Ecuador seems to be moving into revolt, for sure. I can't say that as I know the full story, but all I know is that the Canadian government is supporting the government there, so we must be wrong. So the people must be right. I can't say as I know the full story in Ecuador. Algorithms messing with us, eh? Maybe they're starting to think that you guys are just spamming. You ever think that's the case? Capitalism is revolting. Yeah, no kidding, dude. Capitalism is revolting, man. I'm so sick of it, man. I'm so tired of it. Like, it seems to me like I only ever meet two types of people these days. People who are miserable but pretending like their grind set is what matters. And people who are miserable because they understand what's going on. DM. They're just jealous because we're John Simps. That's right. Maybe what they're trying to do is they're trying to keep the chat. There's something that they track, right? It's called chat rate, right? So there's chat rate. So there's concurrent viewers. So there's 8 of you here now, right? This can go up to as high as 25, right? It even has like a rate that it's at. We're doing a little bit of behind the scenes, right? Some days it's high, some days it's low. It's just how it is. And then there's something called the chat rate, right? And the chat rate is just how many people are commenting and how quickly it's moving, right? And of course, views is how many unique views. So 40 people have looked at this video so far. The average view duration is about a half hour. That's common. People come in. This is something I need to get a bit more manipulative of, or get a better handle on. That, like, when are people coming in? And I could create like chunks, right? But anyway, slow mode is on purpose because that prevents spammers. That people do come in and just try to spam it. Actually, nope, I'm never turning off slow mode. That's never going to happen. Because and slow mode is literally like a 5-second, 10-second delay. So it's only going to matter if you're literally trying to go like, "Hi John, enter. How are you? Enter. I like your face. Enter. You're such a cool guy. Enter." Like, it's literally what I don't want. Like, I'm not interested in that at all. Like, if you're posting something and then it's not showing up, then the algorithm is picking something up. And maybe, speculatively, they're just trying to keep my chat rate low. Because if the chat rate increases, then that tips the algorithm to spread my stuff around more. Because the more you guys comment... oh, excuse me. Oof. The more you guys comment, the more activity it means is happening, the more interest is generated, right? That kind of stuff. Like, literally everything you guys do drives the algorithm, right? If you like, share, and subscribe, right, as we all say, that drives the algorithm, right? The more likes it gets, the more it's like, oh, this is interesting, right? Because the first test is, does this guy's own followers like this, right? And if my own followers like it, then it begins to send it out into the world, right? That's how the algorithm tends to work. Only 30% of your messages come through? I don't know what to tell you, DM, man. Maybe they flagged you. Maybe they're worried about you, bud. Maybe they're looking. This guy's the troublemaker right here. This DM guy right here. He's the one causing the problems. We gotta watch out for him. Yep, exactly. Okay, YouTube, I'm a commie. Ban me. Yeah, shadow banned. Yeah, I mean that's one of the significant things, right? What I find is that usually there's like a word that YouTube doesn't like, and you have to keep rewording your sentence until it shows up. Yeah, that's usually what it is, actually. And there are words, for sure. There are words like, and again, I think that there has been a ratcheting up since Roe v. Wade. That Roe v. Wade landed, and I really think that they basically took their algorithm that's going around making sure that, like, trying to pick up on any kind of, like, extremist activity, because that's what it's doing, right? It's trying to pick up on extremist activity, right? Like, it's trying to find out, like, are people actually getting together to foment violent revolution? That's really what it's doing, right? I miss doing those walk around videos too, dude. The glasses. I'm sorry, man. Like, I look like an idiot. I look stupid. I feel stupid wearing these glasses. Doing the walk around videos while I've got these ridiculous glasses on. Not interested. I did a couple and was just like, ugh, ugh, ugh. And also, I need a break. I just need a vacation, dude. I need a vacation. Like, so I'm taking it as a sign. The universe has told me to slow down, and so I'm slowing down a little bit. Once I get the glasses back, we're going to kick it back up. Don't worry about it. It's coming. Yeah. It can be more than a word filter. It can be for negative overall concepts. Yeah. Because what they're doing is they're really sifting around for violent activity and violent organization. That's really what they're looking for right now. Because, like, it's not hard to see. It's not hard to see. You can spend any amount of time on the socials, any amount of time on any of this kind of stuff. You're gonna see, right? Like, the most common one that I'm seeing is a meme that's going around saying, "Hey, we know where these guys' addresses are." Like, that's what it's saying. And and not only that, but also, like, literally sending around the addresses. Like, not just saying we know what they are, but showing you what they are. So, like, doxing them, basically, on like on like an international scale, right? Like, so I'm of the opinion that they have ramped this shit up, like, a couple of notches. Like, my YouTube channel got a strike, which got taken away once they realized that I'm not advocating it, I'm commenting on it, right? So if I say a phrase like, there are many people who say that we should go to this place and do this thing, but if I say it explicitly, then the robot's going to be like, oh, hey, what's this guy talking about? What's this guy talking about? What's this guy talking about? Right? So you're going to get flagged. You're going to get that kind of stuff. And it's definitely been ramped up. Like, it's definitely been ramped up. Yeah, I get death threats as a vocal commie. There's no way I'm submitting to a digital ID. Yeah. Like, once the new digital ID and internet sign-on tokens get normalized, we can get rid of that stuff and start applying demerits to problem individuals. Give them societal timeouts and such. Yeah. Like, well, because there's something interesting, right? Like, they also know that, like, people have the right to protest. And we do. We have the right to protest. Like, that's enshrined in our Constitution or in the Charter, right? Oh, I forget what article this is. Sorry, Eric. I'm feeling fairly overwhelmed today. Article. Was it this one? Oh, yes, it was this one. All right, let's pivot into this then. This is by David Bollier. My advice to an aspiring economist. Don't be an economist. Get out of here. As a non-economist, I have little useful advice to young economists seeking to build a successful career. The typical path forward is to absorb the received wisdom of one's elders and develop new insights within their frameworks of thought. But what I'd like to suggest is that the upcoming generation of economists need to help their discipline come to terms with some epochal realities of our times. A number of forces, climate change, collapsing ecosystems, fisheries, coral reefs, soil desertification, loss of water, biodiversity loss, savage wealth inequality, tech monopolies, and their data surveillance, The growing precarity of livelihoods are challenging some foundational assumptions of standard economics. My advice to an aspiring economist, therefore, is to immerse yourself in disciplines and ways of life that lie outside of the prevailing economic paradigm and typical career paths. The future will require economics to rethink itself in light of what's happening outside of its aging, self-referential modes of thought. It needs to seriously re-examine its ontological and epistemological premises to take account of the different ways of knowing and being beyond those of modern industrialized West. In short, the discipline, as currently taught, desperately needs to get beyond its one world power perspective, as anthropologist Arto Ekobar puts it. Outside of its narrow, asocial, and transaction-focused way of seeing the world, there is actually a plural verse of life that intimately conjoins the human and the more than human, and the individual with social collectives. It would help, therefore, for economists to open up deeper conversations with the social sciences, especially anthropology and sociology, and with political economy, complexity sciences, and evolutionary sciences. Economists may also want to acknowledge the limits of intellectual inquiry itself. A significant amount of what we know is embodied in our bones, viscera, and flesh, and not necessarily part of anyone's canon. It is tacit, situated, local, and embodied knowledge. Thankfully, the emotional and sociological dimensions of life, including in economic contexts, are beginning to get more serious attention. But generally, these phenomena are regarded as aberrations from the default rational actor model, or used as heterodox tools to advance familiar corporate and capitalist goals. Meanwhile, a backlash is brewing against the standard free market narratives because of its limitations. Many critics are seeking a deeper, more structural paradigm shift in mindset that would make economics the servant of the larger ethical, social, and ecological goals, and not an end in itself. I bring some different perspectives about economics because I've been an activist and scholar involved with various citizen movements for more than 40 years. I learned a great deal from my time with Ralph Nader and the consumer movement as a non-academic scholar of the commons, which is emerging as a new old paradigm of economics, politics, and culture. I have learned about economics from the outside in, so to speak. I've found that many of its core premises about the separation of humans from nature, about the purported sovereignty of humans as individual, rational agents, about the glib conflation of price with value, to be untenable. Working with Nader and the consumer movement of the late 70s and 80s, I learned through countless policy battles, safety design of cars, pesticides in food, workplace toxins, drug safety, etc., that the narratives of free market economics work much better as abstract theories and political cover stories than as realistic accounts of everyday market life. Put more bluntly, by focusing so obsessively on market transactions, economic analysis tends to ignore social, ecological, and intergenerational realities. It tends to marginalize and dismiss them as externalities. The misguided presumption is that free markets are self-regulating and don't really need governance, market interventions, until, of course, the next oil spill, deadly drug, or speculative financial bubble intrudes to show otherwise. As various externalities from climate change to market abuses disrupt social stability and indeed confidence in markets themselves, future economists will need to address a gaping hole in standard economic theory. How shall the anti-social, ecologically destructive tendencies of free markets be reliably constrained or prevented in the first place? Given the political sabotage and systemic failures of government regulation over the past 50 years, this is a profound question. It's entirely possible that waning social trust and legitimacy in the free market state system will intensify strongman authoritarian responses, hastening the corporate neo-feudalism underway. Are economists prepared to deal with such impending traumas? It's clear to me that political economy and the underlying cultural life that informs it must increasingly be part of an economics education. Revisiting the work of economic anthropologist Karl Polanyi, especially his seminal book The Great Transformation, offers a good way to see capitalism in its larger historical dimensions. From there, move on to some contemporary, adventuresome schools of economic thought that study complexity, social behavior, social networks, and evolution. Each is opening up fresh, more humanistic ways to understand the deeper logic of economic activity, and in some cases to offer illuminating new frameworks of understanding. Future economists should also reflect deeply on their field. If human societies are not simply aggregations of isolated individuals who come together to truck and barter, how then shall we conceptualize society? It's also worth questioning the very idea of the self-sovereign individual. We are not born as sovereign individual agents, even though, of course, we have certain capacities and scope for self-determination. We are, rather, creatures whose personal development and flourishing requires that we be nested within social and intergenerational collectives. We're actually nested eyes. As evolutionary scientists like E.O. Wilson, David Sloan Wilson, and Martin Nowak have argued, group selection is a more influential force than individual selection in evolution. Collective social structures profoundly influence and constrain our individuality. Biologically speaking, it is even a bit difficult to talk about individuals as if they were separate from nature. Human beings could not function without millions of bacteria living in their guts, or without being immersed within a biodiverse ecosystem of living organisms. Yet, much of economics remains locked into the mindset of atomistic acquisitiveness, individuals engaged in mechanical cause and effect transactions in the service of capital accumulation. There is relatively little attention to the holistic, dynamic, non-linear dimensions of living systems. The notion of human aliveness and non-market values are scanted. The idea of rational self-interest is now so thoroughly embedded in modern life that the ontological frame is considered self-evident. However, as economists Samuel Bowles and Herbert Gintis show in their book, A Cooperative Species, Human Reciprocity and Its Evolution, human beings have a rich evolutionary history of developing social systems and institutions to support strong reciprocity and collective interests. The significant work of the late Elinor Ostrom, too, helped demonstrate the profound importance of social collaboration as a powerful economic force. Alas, despite her receiving the Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences in 2009 for her pioneering work, the discipline has not really embraced her perspectives more fully. This is a shame. Ostrom's work has been a bellwether for many social movements that reject the stunted social vision and imagination of standard economics. In my own work as a commons scholar, I have seen scores of self-organized commons function extremely well. They use peer governance and provisioning to give people greater control over their lives, and in more satisfying, humane ways than labor markets. One need only to look to such phenomena as open source software, cosmo-local production, globally shared design, knowledge, and local physical production, open access scientific publishing, data commons, Wi-Fi and civic infrastructures managed as commons, cooperatives, community land trusts, community-supported agriculture, agroecology, indigenous land stewardship, co-housing, participatory budgeting in government, and much else. In our recent book, Free, Fair, and Alive, The Insurgent Power of the Commons, Silk, Helfrich, and I identify the success of these various common models. They propose a very different ideation of what a human being is and does. If we are to understand the cooperation that has animated human affairs for millennia, we must see people's lives as relational and not merely transactional. We must start to interrogate the inner lives of participants and not rely on catch-all tautologies that people rationally maximize their utility. Helfrich and I therefore propose a framework of patterns of commoning to explicit the salient ethical and social relationships that help produce stable, effective commons. Commons as social systems, and not commons as merely unowned resources. These sorts of extra economic departures are going to be vital in the future. Aspiring economists would do well to march boldly into these less familiar intellectual terrains and develop them. Otherwise, some archaic parochial ideas will exceed their shelf life, such as the idea that private property, market exchange, and contracts are the only serious regimes for meeting needs. Whether forced by pandemics or the collapsing infrastructure of capitalism, future economists will need to know that cooperation and commoning are pervasive and efficacious, even in advanced industrial civilizations. It's just that they aren't culturally legible or adequately studied by economics. On the map of economic inquiry, the human activities of commoning, mutual aid, peer provisioning, and care work might as well be labeled "Dragons lie here." Fortunately, evolutionary sciences are addressing some of these problems by exploring non-market behaviors and values that have marked the human species for eons. The dynamics of cooperation, relational commitments, and non-materialistic co-motivations are getting new attention. Evolutionary sciences are also helping us realize that the premises of libertarian individualism that has long defined market economics is in fact something of a utopian projection. And still, amidst all this tumult, many economists are disinclined to rethink the foundations of their field. It reminds me of the closing joke in Woody Allen's film Annie Hall. A guy has a crazy brother who thinks he is a chicken. The doctor asks, "Why don't you turn him in?" The guy replies, "I would, but I need the eggs." Why is the free market discourse so perdurable despite so many social, ecological, and political realities that call its logic and categories of thought into question? Because the whole field, despite its flaws, is functional enough and entrenched. It needs the eggs, the certitude of quantitative analysis aping the hard sciences, the credentialed expertise always in demand by powerful institutions, the prestige that comes with proximity to power. But behind these factors, there is a new world aborun that economics needs to engage with and understand. There are brilliant economic thinkers like Kate Raworth, inventor of donut economics framework, the writings of degrowth economist Jason Hickel, and the late anthropologist David Graeber, the thinkers associated with the web journal Real World Economics, and a number of student associations clamoring for new economic paradigms and pedagogy. Beyond reading the right things, I find that it helps a lot to hang out with the right crowd, listen to serious new voices, and bring one's full humanity to the questions of the moment. Economists of all ages, but especially younger ones, who have the suppleness and imagination to grow, need to pay attention to these outsider voices. There is a new world that is fast overtaking us, and it needs to be seen and explained on its own terms. Oof. Man. That really hurts my eyes. I'm so looking forward to these new glasses, man. I'm so looking forward to these new glasses. Interesting use of the adjective in that list, savage. Yeah, if modern economics would understand this stuff, they would be too crippled, I think, rather than be able to make a living at their job. Nobody would hire them. if they would actually care about people. Exactly. Because it's about extraction, right? That's the policy of the day. It's extraction and abandonment. Yeah, tough on the eyes. It's the glasses. It's the glasses. It's very, very tiring. And this article, it's a restatement of something I say all the time on this channel, right? Modern economics it's a fraudulent pursuit. Like the people who are engaging in modern economics, they don't read their own books. Like they don't read their own texts. Like they are illiterate. Like what this list of like new economic thinkers, near as I can tell, these are just people who are reading the economics books and reading the literature. Like, it pays to be illiterate. That's the core problem with the field of economics. That it pays to be illiterate. The less you know, the better you do. So, we've got some Ukraine war. Nearly 90% of Ukrainians say giving territories to Russia to reach peace unacceptable. 66% of Ukrainians believe their country will succeed in driving Russia out of occupied territory. Only 3% of Ukrainians say they would agree to grant Russia control of occupied territories in exchange for peace, while 89% found it unacceptable, according to a poll conducted at the University of Chicago. When asked to evaluate the possibility of the war ending by granting Russia control over some parts of Ukrainian territory occupied by Russia after February 24th, the majority of Ukrainians opposed the idea. Regarding the territories that Moscow occupied before the full-scale invasion, 81% of respondents said it was also unacceptable to give them away to achieve peace agreements. The poll, which was conducted between June 9th to the 13th, revealed that 66% of Ukrainians believe their country will succeed in driving Russia out of the territory occupied after the start of the invasion. Meanwhile, 53% were positive about freeing the whole of Donbass and Crimea. 53% think they're getting Crimea back. Ukrainians also praised President Zelensky for leading the country's fight against Russia's invasion, with 78% of respondents saying that he handles it very well, or somewhat well. Zelensky received even more recognition for his relation with Western countries, with 80% of Ukrainians approving of his actions. Kiev announced on Wednesday that 144 Ukrainian soldiers, including defenders of Azovstal's steel plant in Mariupol, were freed in a prisoner exchange with Moscow. This is the largest exchange since the start of the full-scale Russian invasion. Of the 144 freed, 95 are Azovstal defenders, the main intelligence dictatorate of Ukraine's defense ministry said on Telegram. It added that the 43% of the freed servicemen belonged to the Azov Regiment, which Russia considers a neo-Nazi organization, and has previously said its soldiers should face trial. Denis Pushilin, the head of the Russian forces in the self-proclaimed People's Donetsk Republic, confirmed the exchange. Earlier in May, more than 2,500 Ukrainian soldiers surrendered after holding out for 3 months under siege in the Azovstal in heavily bombed Mariupol. Zelensky promised they would return home under an exchange procedure. Yeah, nobody pulled the Donbass, exactly. Still, though, tells you where the Ukrainians are at, right? And in the meantime, Belarus sends out conscription notices en masse. Sounds like Belarus is preparing for an escalation. Needs to get more boots on the ground, right? There's big concerns that there are forces being trained throughout Europe to be sent to Ukraine. That what we are seeing, what have I been saying the whole time? Right? The only way Ukraine wins this thing is if boots come in from other places. Well, that's happening. European nations are training troops to go to Ukraine. That as close to an escalation as you could possibly see. And the Ukrainians are in for it. I don't know how this is all going to shake out. Like there's, not a good sign. Not a good sign for sure. Right? To me, the only thing that could possibly prevent it would be if the European nations involved in this procedure experienced political upheaval and a political overthrow. And someone who's a little bit more even-minded came to power in a place like Germany or France, right? But the joining of Finland and Sweden into NATO, right? A clear escalation that Russia has very much stated is an escalation. It's going to shake out in a major military conflagration in Eastern Europe. Seems to be the case. Seems to be the case, Watson. This might sound like an ignorant view, but I think Putin would have been pretty irrelevant on the world stage if it wasn't for him being leader at this moment. Yeah. No, I think that that's actually true, Mocked. Like, I don't think that that's ignorant. I think, look, if my position on Putin engaging in Ukraine is that he was drawn into it. Drawn into it not only by his own people, but by rival political parties. That the perspective that says that Putin is this like power mad and he wants to run in there and get like, I just don't see it. I see a guy who's sort of been drawn to it, that he doesn't have a choice, right? Like and if a similar thing was happening on the border of like North Dakota and Manitoba, I would expect Canada to do the same thing, right? The Donbass War is a serious event that we ignore, that nobody talks about, and everybody just pretends like it didn't happen or it isn't happening, right? And Putin gets drawn into the conflict. And if it wasn't for this, like if the Americans basically just left it be and were just like, didn't attempt to coup the government, didn't do the fucking Donbass war, didn't do any of this shit, yeah, Putin's not that relevant. Not really. Like, and I've always said this of Putin. Like, he very much just wants to kind of put his hand on the rudder. He doesn't really have a vision for Russia, right? He's just got his hand on the rudder, and it seems to me like he always just wanted to get like just be the guy to guide Russia through the waters on the trajectory that they were at. And now though, like so much of what we've seen, I feel like is just Russia being like, okay, I guess we have to, right? Like if it was up to Russia, they would have joined NATO, right? Like they applied. Like if it was up to Putin, they would have joined this. They wanted to, right? But no, that's not how it's gone, right? All of it seems incredibly forced to me. Well, there's big questions surrounding the idea, like what's going on here, right? Like what's going on here? Like why is the CIA? Why is the United States getting involved in this to the scale that they're getting involved in, right? And you can have the conversation about like there's a ton of farmland here, right? There's like a spice must flow sort of argument, right? Resource acquisition, who controls what, right? That the Americans want the resources to be flowing this way and not flow this way, right? Like pretty standard sort of stuff. But when I look at it, I just see kind of like an old Cold War guard of people who seriously think that they're in like Rocky 3. Right? That the Ruskies, we got to do a one over on the Ruskies. Right? I really do think that what we are seeing is the result of dementia. like a kind of societal dementia, where the people who are making the decisions don't actually know anything about Russia. They don't care to know anything about Russia. They don't care to actually listen in and see what's actually being said. They don't care to understand what's being said, right? All they really understand is Russia's getting resources and getting benefits, and we got to do something about it because Russia's bad. Like, for real. Like, the people who are running the show for America essentially watched Rocky 3 and then are off to the races, near as I can tell. Like, why foment the coup? Why send troops into the Donbass? Why empower, like, obvious neo-Nazi groups? Like, why do any of it? Right? It's just hubris and stupidity at this point. There's no real reason to have done it. You know? It's just creating turmoil for the sake of creating turmoil. And there's a million things the United States could have done differently. Like, a million things they could have done differently. But it's almost like they want this war, is what it comes down to. They want to alienate other nations. They want to draw lines in the sand. They want the fight. And everyone's upset at Russia because Russia said, okay, like, if you demand that we have the fight, then the fight is what needs to be done. Right? And really, I think a lot of it comes down to how terrified they are of this. Right? Team Diversity Squad. Right? I think the Americans are really, really scared of this. That this is very, 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 very scary to them. This idea that these 5 countries, 2 of which are the most populous, the largest country on the continent of South Africa, or of South America rather, right? Russia, the old Cold War rival, right? They're all getting together. And this nation of this Christian theocracy full of white supremacists is looking at this and saying, this is ungodly, it's not Christian. Like really, guys, like, I really, really do think, like, we're looking at, like, a kind of a madness that is happening in America right now. Like, it's not going to be too much different from, like, Warhammer 40K shit. Like, if you don't know what that is, like, it's literally just, like, rabid, warmongering, spacefaring imperialists who, like, go and die for the Imperium and are constantly, like, the Space Marines, who are, like, the humans, right, obviously the most powerful force in the galaxy, or one of the most powerful force in the galaxies. They're xenophobic. They literally just go into territory and are like, there's this race called the Eldar, which are space elves, basically. And whenever the humans show up, they're just like, Eldar scum, and they just start shooting immediately. Like, they don't ask questions. They're not like, why are these guys here? Until after they've scoured the place. And it's like what it's gonna be. Like, it's going to be like that. Where the Lauren Boeberts and Marjorie Tyler Greens and Donald Trumps and Matt Gaetz and DeSantis's and all these guys are going to be the people who have control of the largest military on the planet and the nuclear stockpile. And these guys are going to be waving their Bibles around, talking about end times shit. Like, it's how it's going. And if you don't need to look too much farther than Ukraine itself to see this. Why do any of this? Why be here? Why overthrow this? Why cause this turmoil? Why cause these problems? At all. At all. Like you're flirting with a nuclear superpower that does have a strong military in its own right. Why? To what end? For what purpose? For what gain? To help who? It's just a crazed madness that's happening, that's overtaking America. And Roe v. Wade is the shot across the bow. Like, they're stripping away rights. They're going to strip away more rights. It's going to get more serious. Quickly. And, like, conflicts like this, like, do you think the Christian theocrats are going to make rational decisions on the international world stage in regards to what they do with their war machine? I don't. I think they're going to act like Christian theocrats. Right? Like, when George W. Bush launches the war into Iraq, he literally calls it a crusade. Like, the Muslims of this region regard it as another crusade. Right? Like, these people are unhinged. Like, literally, the only book that they pretend to read is the Bible. And they don't even read that. Because if they did, they would realize that, yeah, probably Jesus doesn't want you doing that shit. Probably Jesus was an anti-war sort of a fellow, I think. It's probably the case that Christ would be against the idea of imperialistic war. Probably against the concept of nuclear war. It's going to get so wacky, guys. Like, wacky is exactly the word to use. Like, it's just going to be wacky. Like, what kind of crazy shit do you think these guys are going to try to pull? Like, what crazy shit is going to happen in the United States when you've got this highly militarized police force that is white supremacist in its outlook, that is about maintaining a power structure, that is a slave system, that carries around a Bible and it considers itself a Christian theocracy? Like, what kind of wacky, dumb, and what's gonna be crazy, guys? Like, this is where it's gonna actually get a little crazy. Is that, like, we were talking at the beginning of this stream about the Batman, right? About and what's the point of talking about these fictional characters and all of this? Well, just wait for it. Just wait until we get some of these superhero films where the hero is explicitly fascist. Just wait until Homelander's not the villain. Just wait until we start to get these remakes of Star Wars shit where Darth Vader's the good guy. Just wait. Just wait until we start seeing legitimate Hollywood scale level Christian fascist propaganda. Just wait. Capitalism will absolutely begin selling movies to these people. It's already started. It's already started. It's just that right at this moment, the films suck. Right? You wait. We're going to see like an Avengers level, like Marvel movie, DC Comics movie, right? Big CGI summer blockbuster that is going to be explicitly fascist. And likely Christian fascist in its worldview and in its outlook. And I don't mean like could be interpreted that way. But it is very much like the white race is the superior race in its outlook. Hey Vince, how you doing? You mean like a sympathetic version of the Turner Diaries? Yeah, here you go. Binging Stranger Things finally caught up. Last 2 episodes are out tomorrow. Tucker Carlson interviewed Bolsonaro in Brazil. Interesting. That's actually kind of an interesting interview. Tucker Carlson's such an interesting figure to me. Like, first of all, like he is this like white supremacist fascist figure within the discourse. But he has like interesting interviews with interesting people. I don't know how to describe it, you know? Like, every so often I watch Tucker Carlson do something and I'm like, oh, yeah. I wish more people would do that kind of stuff. Like, where's the interview with Bolsonaro from, like, CNN or ABC or any of that shit? Lula is the best option. I wonder why Tucker simps for fascists. Yeah. There is that. And I mean, of course, Bolsonaro's going on Fox News. Like, Lula is likely going to be the winner of the next election. Like, it seems pretty likely that that's the case. Bolsonaro looks like he's on his way out. Like, all the polls say so. Sounds like a boring movie. How can you possibly enjoy an empire destroying the Ewoks? I mean, we've seen it before. Like, take a look at all of those John Wayne movies. Like, John Wayne was releasing explicit pro-war propaganda films. We've seen it all before. It's not new, right? Like, just like Captain America or Iron Man going to Iraq and blowing it up. And just, like, all the stereotypical racism. All that shit. Like, it's coming, guys. It's gonna be really, really explicit too. Like it's not gonna be pretending at all. Like all of the like ghastly racism that we all abhor, right? It's going to be explicitly laid out. Did you see Toronto Star is basically saying Pierre is worse than Trump? Yeah. Toronto Star is, first of all, it's owned by the same people who donate to, it's owned by the same people who donate to the Ford dumb shits, right? So it's conservative a run in the first place. I feel like, although I do feel like there is concern in the establishment about Pierre Poilievre, which I find to be quite odd. Like, it doesn't get more establishment than Pierre, right? Like, it's got to be the case that the Star is basically saying that, oh yeah, you know what'll really get these guys riled up to vote for Pierre, if we start publishing articles saying that we hate him, right? Like, the media is one of the most untrusted organizations out there. Most hated institutions. So, like, Toronto Star saying that, oh, Pierre's worse than Trump. Well, I don't know. Is that going to dissuade people? First of all, it's hysterically wrong. Like, Pierre's not worse than Trump, obviously. Like, Pierre Poilievre is just like a Harperite. Like, he's not like a Harperite. He is a Harperite, right? He's been working under Stephen Harper his whole life. Right? And the idea that he's gonna be worse than Trump, it's a total joke to me. I see a lot more honesty from his show than others, so for that I appreciate, but I loathed him and Fox only a few years ago. Well, this is the thing. This is how they're gaining traction, right? They're actually telling the truth about what's going on in their society in terms of the cultural despair. Like, what do fascists do? They galvanize the anger and the despair created by the system they defend in order to seize power for themselves, right? So instead of saying, instead of ignoring it, the way that liberals or even conservatives do, right? They're highlighting it and they're showing it and they're galvanizing it so they can funnel it where? Into white supremacist lines, right? Like that guy that was here the other night, right? Be like, oh, your life is so terrible and everything's collapsing and it's so horrible and you know who the real problem is? It's the Jews. Like that's what they're doing, right? And you're getting a bunch of angry, young, white men who are full of testosterone, who are pissed off, many of whom are picking up guns and shooting up schools and shit, who are getting frustrated and angry, and you're telling them we've got to direct that anger towards something that isn't the owners. What do you think's going down? They're doing it. It works. It's very effective. We're seeing it in real time. That's Tucky. Like, that's Tucky. That's what he is. Right? You can't galvanize a disenfranchised populace without telling them about their disenfranchisement. Right? And you accept that their disenfranchisement is real. You accept that their anger and frustration is real. You highlight what is happening in your life. You are honest with them about it so that you can direct them away from the owners. And you can direct them towards the women's rights, Roe v. Wade, trans people, the groomers, right? Homosexuals. Just watch. Like, that legislation's going to be overturned in America. Like, if they're going to go after Roe v. Wade, a legislation that's literally going to, like, a decision that's literally going to kill people, they're for sure going to go after gay marriage and gay rights. For sure. Right? So just like all fascists, right, they're going after the feminist movement, the LGBTQ movement, right? They're going after minority groups, right? They're going to go after all of this shit. And like, how long do you think it's going to be that they're going to look at these ICE detention centers and somebody like Trump or somebody like these guys are just going to be like, why don't we just take them and shoot them? They're just sitting there. They're just sinking our resources. Just kill them. Just kill them. How long until that actually happens? I don't think it's that long. Like, they've got the detention centers. They've got the concentration camps already set up. Like, they've got a group of soldiers who are completely willing to operate these things, right? Completely willing to go and round up people. Completely willing to do this job already. Like, for sure there's people in their ranks who you could just be like, yeah, just shoot them. Just walk in there and just mow these guys down. Let's be done with it. Like, it's... like, all of this is coming. I kind of look back on my life and I feel like the regret that I have is only that I didn't believe in myself sooner. Like, I was like 17 when I was talking about the rising fascism in this country. And people always sort of deflected me off. And it was the classic sort of stuff. Oh, everything you hate is Nazis. Everything you hate is fascism. That kind of stuff. And so you get waylaid for a bit, and then you go off and try to pursue something else. And then another thing happens where it's obvious that there's a rising fascism. The election of Donald Trump was the moment when a lot of people who I had been talking to about this stuff started to turn to me and say, hey, John, what do you think's going on? And actually started taking me a bit more seriously. Like, the Democrats are going to get murdered in this next election. Like, in this midterm election. It's not going to be close. Like, they're going to get slaughtered. Like, they were given the House and the Senate, and they basically betrayed the populace utterly. They went in there saying that Biden was the next FDR. Like, this is a disillusionment that is going to make the Obama years look like baby's first delusionment. Like, people have been abandoned. And the only force that I can see that's actually attempting to galvanize the anger and the frustration and the rage caused by such a thing are the literal fascists. Like, the open fascists. Like, it's open. Like, you got guys like Matt Walsh, who literally calls himself a fascist, in the conversation, at the table. Like, and then, after 2 more years of just bleeding out the United States, the people of the United States, we're going to see another Trump rise. We're going to see Trump ascend again. And this time, when he ascends, he's going to have allies. Right? The first time he got in was wild. He didn't think he was going to win. There was no one in the political apparatus that was interested in working with him or interested in dealing with him in any kind of significant way. He was chaos personified, right? He did the bidding of the ownership class, and so maintained his class allegiance, right? But all the rest of it, like the impeachments, all that kind of shit, was just for show, and everybody knows it, right? Everybody in the political establishment knows it. Like, they don't actually care about Donald Trump and the things that he did in any kind of serious and meaningful way. And so Trump's ascension this second time, though, so already, because of Donald Trump's election, already we've got people like Lauren Boebert, DeSantis. It empowered people. There were a lot of people who suddenly went, oh, anyone can do this. I can do this, right? So now you got your Major Tyler Greens, your Lauren Boeberts, your Matt Gaetzes, your real delusional, kooky losers who are now allies to Trump. And Trump is building power and is going to continue building power. And a lot of the people who are going to get in after this midterm swing are going to be QAnon kooky losers like Major Tyler Greene, are going to be Trump surrogates, right? So now the second round of Trump 2.0 is going to be the Trump party. It's going to be different. It's going to be very different. It's going to be wild. It's going to be kooky as shit. And we all still go to work. Like, it's happening in front of our eyes day by day. Every single day that goes by, it's what's happening. And I've been seeing it coming for years and years and years. Like, I wish that we had taken to the streets after... I wish that we had taken to the streets when the election was stolen from Gore. When the Supreme Court declared Bush the president. I wish we had taken to the streets then. Or I wish we had have abandoned the Democrats after the first Obama term when it became obvious that he was just a surrogate for Wall Street again. Like the betrayal of the Democrats then. I wish that we had have abandoned them then. Right? Gotten one of those neocons in. Because the true damage isn't going to be done because some kind of miscalculation or some kind of power play that goes awry, or something like that. It's going to be explicit ideological stupidity. It's literally going to be these maniacs saying we need to fight for the glory of Jesus Christ. Drop the bombs. Like it's going to be like that. Because these people are crazed. And there's no other way to describe it. They think magic is real. That there's a wizard coming back at any moment to tell them how good a job they did oppressing minority groups and women and homosexuals, destroying other countries. They genuinely think that Jesus Christ is going to come back and say to them, or that they will die and ascend to heaven and be told by Jesus Christ that they did a great job doing all of that. That's what they think. Like, read your Bible. Get prolific in the language of Christianity. Because that is going to become the language of the culture. Like it or not. Capitalism won't scoff and go, oh, that's just a bunch of hooba-jooba nonsense. Capitalists won't scoff and say we need to stand up against this. Like, it's not going to do any of that. It's going to see an opportunity to make profits. It's going to see the majority of voters vote in a Christian theocracy, and it's going to package it and sell it. The culture will become a Christian fascist culture. You watch it happen. All of that, like, rednecky, hickey, USA Eagles, everything's an American flag, shoot your gun, USA shit, put a cross on it, Jesus Christ with sunglasses, you're set. All of that becomes the culture. Like, the big blockbuster movie of 2026. The big blockbuster movie of 2026 is gonna be like Jesus Christ fighting alongside Iron Man and Captain America against Muslims. Like, straight up. And it's not going to be a spoof. Oh yeah, I honestly believe that once Jesus returns, he'll be utterly disgusted with the Christian behavior. Yeah, you wait, you watch what they make him do. You watch what they make him do. I keep thinking about reading the book cover to cover, never have, but I've been thinking about it for over a decade or two now. So, look, Methane, I'm going to ease your burdens a little bit here, okay? Pick one of the four Gospels. I actually recommend Luke. But pick whichever one you think is the best and read that. Okay? Like, Matthew is a diary written by a tax collector. So it's got precision in it. Some of the best speeches that Christ gave, the Sermon on the Mount, some of the best sermons that Christ gave are in the book of Matthew. So Matthew's more of a dictate, a diary. Mark is campfire stories, because that's how Peter dictated it to Mark, who's the scribe. Luke was a historian. That's why I recommend Luke, because he's got the most thorough perspective. Luke comes in after the fact and asks everybody what the story is and finds out the story and writes it all down. It's very thorough. And then John is described as the disciple Jesus loved. And so John tells a more humanistic story of Christ. I highly recommend picking one of those and reading that at first. Because if you start at the beginning and slog through, you're going to stop. It's not an easy journey. What are your thoughts on the Gnostic books that were not canonized? I mean, they were not canonized for exactly the reasons you thought they were not. Because the Gnostics were saying, wait a minute, if Christ is the Son of God, why am I not the Son of God? And if you and you and you are all sons of God, doesn't that mean that we are all individually divine beings who actually have a connection to the larger divine existence that is the Godhead that we're all talking about? Doesn't that mean that we don't need these priests or intersaries or any of that kind of stuff? Doesn't it mean that we just as individuals and of ourselves are legitimate in our feelings and our expressions and have the right to be heard and to be heard by everyone and to be respected for our beliefs so long as they don't cause harm to others? Doesn't that seem right? So the church had to get rid of that. Pretty black and white in my view. Like the Gnostics were also more like one of the things that people don't like to talk about very much, but I think is absolutely the truth, is that Christianity was a psychedelic cult. That initially it really was like, let's do a bunch of mushrooms and trip out and think about the nature of reality and all this kind of stuff. Like, there's tons of psychedelic journeys. Like, Christ goes on a psychedelic journey, like the 30 days in the desert, right? Like, so much of Christianity, I think, is tied up into the culture of psychedelics and hallucinogenics and all of this kind of stuff. And the Gnostics carried that on and became more and more explicit about it. And so they wanted to get rid of it. They don't want a populace to understand you can eat this thing and have a fucking divine experience. They're not interested in that. The banning of psychedelics is a long Western tradition. As I understand it, one of the main reasons why they do not coincide with the main Gospel's message. I'm talking about the book of Mary Magdalene, the book of Judas Iscariot. Yeah, I mean, the Gnostics understood that these were stories, right? They understood that. And, like, it would be no different than if, like, the Justice League movies were canonized and everybody agreed that these are his. But Joker can't be told. Joker's not canonized. That goes away, right? So, like, all the glory and the victory and the celebration and all of the go off and fight evil and the greatness of the human race and all this kind of stuff, that's what we're going to focus on. But the story of a society abandoning a mentally handicapped person and him turning against that society, that story can't be told. Right? So it's kind of the same. Judas Iscariot, more like Judas is a chariot. Got him, Compton. Got him. Scathing. Burned. Got it. Luke Gospel. I got no trouble with getting through something. I've read things like Iliad, Odyssey. Oh, okay. You might be okay then, dude. Like, here, if you've read things like the Iliad and the Odyssey and all that, you're a bit more equipped. Hold on 1 second. Where did I put my Bible? I just cleared a bunch of stuff in my space. Hold on 1 second. Oh, come on, John. Oh, yeah, good. I'm a professional. Yeah, good. Misplacing my Bible. That's definitely... My dad would be very proud of me right now. That's actually really annoying. Where'd my Bible go? Where'd my Bible go, guys? What'd I do to it? Where are you, Jesus? I want to read you. Where are the Gospels now? All right. Well, then we'll do it this way. We'll do it this way. Yeah. Yeah. So, depends on the type of book you have. You've got a lot of books are going to be like, okay, so Genesis. Genesis is a series of like short stories and short narratives, right? Like they're the lore and myth and legend stories like Samson, Joseph, a lot of the Adam and Eve story is in Genesis, right? So and everybody tends to read Genesis, and the most has been written about Genesis because there only used to be like one Bible, and the bishop would have it, and he'd go around, and the priests would start the Bible at the beginning, obviously, right? And so they would all read Genesis, and so you end up with everybody writing about Genesis because they wouldn't get to the end of the book by the time the bishop would leave. Exodus is the story of Moses and the Exodus, right? From which we're all sort of familiar with. Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy are the documents that arise from the story of the Exodus. So Leviticus is the book of law, right? Numbers is literally a book of a census. It's literally a census. Don't read Numbers. Straight up. Don't read Numbers. Like, if anything's going to make you kill yourself and stop reading this thing, it's reading the book of Numbers. Leviticus is technically interesting. Same story, though, dude. Like, do not read this thing. Like, it's very, very, like... When washing your hands, ensure that, right? Lots of, like, health advice. The Levites were the priest class. So a lot of it is... So Leviticus, the Levites, right? So a lot of it is just, like... cleanliness rituals, how to do things, what you should do if a woman is menstruating, right? Like lots of that kind of shit is in Leviticus. Please don't read it. Like, unless you really, really want to, and you really want to know, like, the law. Deuteronomy is more law, right? So, and can be broken loosely from like this is more laws, like edicts from the top of the patriarchy, really, and this is more like health and safety is the way to think about it. And then Joshua is the story of Joshua, which is in fact a continuation of the story of Exodus, the story of Moses. And then you get into the more prophets, right? More important figures in the history of Judaism. Judges, Ruth, Samuel, right? 1st, 2nd Kings, Chronicles. You're literally into history, right? You're into like the and then once you get into Ezra, Nehemiah, Tobit and Judith and Esther and Maccabees, like these are social commentators, right? My favorite book, Job. I think Job is one of the most important books of the Bible. Bit of a slog, though, because there's a lot of debate around the philosophies of that day, which, if you don't really know what those are, then everything's a bit odd. But the premise makes a lot of sense. Psalms and Proverbs are like literally like your chicken soup for the soul kind of shit. Like the stuff people make calendars out of, right? Like every single psalm is a song. Proverbs is like the wisdom book. Ecclesiastes. There, I'm glad that I did this because I got here. Everyone has to read Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes is the moment in the Bible where someone actually sits down and goes, what's the point of any of this? What's the point of any of this? What are we doing here? And the answer that the author comes up with, it's attributed to Solomon, which makes sense. Solomon's a very important figure, considered the wisest man in the world. And the answer that Solomon comes up with is, look, just try to enjoy yourself. Just enjoy the work you're doing. Just try to enjoy yourself. As like all of this pursuit of wealth and glory and fame and all of this. I'm Solomon. I'm a king. I've experienced wealth and fame and glory and all of these things. I've went and I've done them, and I can tell you, I think the exact phrase is, they are as the wind. They don't really matter. Find joy in what you do, and what you're and where you are. Be satisfied with what you've got. Live happily there. And it's a very, like, it doesn't pull punches. That's a good way to say it. Like it's a very grounding sort of a book, because it's very much no bullshit. Like it's very much like you are here for a temporary period of time and then you die. What is this? Let's explain. I think that Ecclesiastes should be required reading for everybody. Like everybody. Because I think that there are people who just kind of walk through life like bloop, 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 bling, 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 and then they get old and they die and they're like, what? And they don't even think about it. Ecclesiastes is gonna pull you down a little bit. Song of Songs is porn. There's no other way to describe it. It's love letters written by Solomon to a girl, and he talks about her boobs and how much he likes them. Wisdom Sirach, it's in the title, right? Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, right? Now we're getting into the fall of Jerusalem, right? We're getting into the prophetic books, what's called the prophetic books, but basically the guys who are like, oh, this shithole is falling apart. Lamentations, right? Like, fuck. Fuck. You get into the capturing of the Israelites by the Babylonians, the exile of the Israelites into Babylon, story of Daniel, Hosea, Joel, like all of these are literally just like, fuck you, Israel. How dare you fucking do this to yourself? And that's more or less the opinion of these guys, where they're like, we could have not done this, but we decided to because we're stupid. Like that's the thrust of these pieces, is seeing a frustrated and angry person basically shit on the country that allowed itself to be destroyed like this. Like, these guys don't look at the Babylonians coming in and then the exile. Like, they don't go, how dare you, Babylon, get fucked. They very much are like, how did we allow this to occur? How did we allow this to happen to us? Why did we put ourselves in a position where these Babylonians, the only solution these Babylonians could find to deal with us was to come in and take us? Could we not have found a way to move forward peacefully? Could we have not found a way to have maintained our prestige and our glory and our kingdom? What did we do to deserve this? What did we do? And these guys, a lot of them lay it out. They're like, yeah, you guys fucking poke your thumb at these guys. Like, you insulted them and shit on them. What did you think was going to happen? Right? And there's one thinks that there might be something of an echo in their words. Right? One holds a concern for the fate of Israel and might be interested in actually reading these texts in order to wonder, what did we do? And then you're into the Gospels, right? Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. Actually, these are basically the 4 retellings of the story of Christ. The Acts of the Apostles. So Acts is what happens after. Also, in many ways, the rise of Paul as a figure. And Paul is an important figure in the Christian lore. He's responsible for writing most of the letters that follow, right? So Paul is like a very, very important Christian figure. He starts to arise as a figure in Acts, and then Romans is sort of the history of him. And then his writings, Corinthians, Galatians, these are the churches that he was writing to. So he wrote to the Corinthians, the Galatians, the Ephesians, the Philippians, Colossians, Thessalonians, and yeah, all of this kind of stuff. And then of course these are writings by James, Peter, John, Jude, and then the Book of Revelation. The Book of Revelation is a highly controversial text. The Orthodox Christians don't have it; they don't use it because they think that it allows crazy lunatics to use it as a book of prophecy and attempt to fulfill the prophecy, and so they got rid of it. There's no other way to describe Revelations but a psychedelic trip. There's just no other way to describe it. I actually think that if you read, if you had someone read the Book of Revelations aloud, like someone like the guy that did Darth Vader's voice, you guys all know who I'm talking about, but somebody with a really powerful and strong voice, if you had them read the Book of Revelations aloud and then you just animated it, it would be extremely popular. Right? Just get some like fucking metal guitar ripping and like all the crazy shit and like really take it seriously and show the story as it's and read it aloud. I think people would really go for it. I think it would be really fucking cool. Because it's awesome. Like the Book of Revelations is awesome. Like it's a fucking kick-ass, crazy, yeah. Revelations is the mark of the beast, all that kind of shit. You got it, bud. Like the rise of the Antichrist, all of that crazy shit. For sure. And like your QAnon crowd types, you know, the signs exist. Like it's like the Book of Revelation is one of those books where like, so you think about like the mark of the beast, and it makes sense why people after like absorbing something like Revelations would be skeptical of like RFID chips and stuff, right? Makes sense why that a lot of these people would be like, yeah, good omens, very good, very based on Revelations. Yeah, the tie-in with Daniel and Isaiah, yeah, the Book of Revelations is seriously interesting. Yeah, that's true too. Like Daniel and Isaiah have prophecies and are prophetic, right? Are considered prophetic in their writings, and something that real believers really will say to you is so Daniel Well, and a lot of these prophets like predict things, right? But there's no concept in their mind that like, yeah, like probably the writing happened after the event, right? And so the character is prophesying it, but the writing probably happened after the event. That just doesn't enter the discourse. But that one, I dare say, will be top of my reading lists for Bible texts, but I may save it for last. Oh yeah. Like, in terms of its relevance, like this is the thing that I think is important to understand about Revelation, is that it's not particularly relevant. Like, it's awesome. Like, don't get me wrong, like I think it actually kicks ass. But in terms of like how important is this text to your own spiritual journey and your own sort of spiritual understanding, it's not that important. That like it really is John, the apostle Jesus loved, the only one of the apostles who actually survived. The rest of them are crucified or beheaded or something. John is exiled. Does he end up getting beheaded? I think he does. I forget. But he's essentially isolated and alone on an island, and he obviously trips balls and writes this shit. Like, yeah, the 7 letters to the 7 churches in the first 3 chapters of the book of Revelation is a very good description of the church age up to the tribulation period. Yeah, people do this kind of stuff all the time, Watson, where they're like, the 7 churches and the 7 symbols represent. You hear a lot of that with Revelation, right? The 7 churches represent, and the 7 sigils represent, and the sword that comes from Christ's mouth represent, and that's why it's okay to round up the Jews. So the Orthodox Christians were like, yeah, we're just not going to include Book of Revelations. We can just be done away with it. Exiled to the island of Patmos. Yeah, that's the man. Okay, guys. We've done it. We made it to the end. Read your Bible. Get to know it. There's powerful stuff in here. Yeah, there's powerful stuff. Thanks, Oddity. I always appreciate it, bud. Always remember, guys, you are a quantum being walking around in quantum energy. The billionaire class is spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes you'll never realize it. You'll just stay the good little worker they need you to be. Rebel. Revolt. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.